Well, welcome everybody. A good crowd. That's great to see. And we had snow this weekend. So hopefully, you'll have enough water to fill those dugouts. As long as you build them fairly quickly before the runoff disappears. I'm Pervez Sundarani, and I'm an agricultural water engineer, also known as water specialist. So there's a water specialist distributed throughout the province. So there's a water specialist in Peace River, one in Barhead, one in Edmonton, myself in Red Deer, and one in Lethbridge. And so we're there to provide technical advice as well as review your funding applications, and we'll be discussing that today. So I'm going to be talking about, there's two parts. The first part is going to be the introduction, planning, design, and construction operating systems. And then the second part is going to be water quality. And so we're going to dive right into it. Dugouts, contrary to popular opinion, are not just a hole in the ground. More challenging than a well. You have variable water quality. It's influenced from outside sources. And dugout contractors vary in quality. You have, in the past, we had a lot of farmers doing their own dugouts, which is still the case. Some hire contractors, but contractors, you've got to be very careful with selecting a contractor, getting their references to make sure that you get an experienced contractor with a good background in dugout construction. Various uses that require specific design and operation. So you can have dugouts for livestock. Dugouts are more and more being used for aquaculture, as well as recreational fishing. Pesticide spray mixing. More and more dugouts are being used now for irrigation purposes. Both in their aesthetic and recreational aspects of dugouts. Firefighting, and occasionally dugouts have also been used for domestic purposes, for household purposes.
Pervez,
yes?
could you just hold your mic up closer?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Oh, okay.
That's much better, thank you.
Okay, so I'll just go through this slide once again. You have various uses for dugouts, livestock, aquaculture, recreational fishing, as well as aquaculture. Actually, that's a different subject, but actually growing fish for commercial use in dugouts. Pesticide spray mixing, irrigation, firefighting, and domestic. Dugouts are used for domestic purposes as well. Okay, so in terms of planning a dugout, there's the first issue that everybody needs to address is the regulatory issue, and Angela Fulton is at the back with Alberta Environmentally Protected Areas, and she will be making a presentation on the regulatory requirements for dugouts. I just have this slide on it, and just to explain that two main aspects of regulatory issues. There's the approval to construct the works, and a license is required for very large dugouts for use of water. And there are exemptions in certain situations, low volume exceptions, etc. And as always, it's illegal to sell water. Okay, for siting a dugout, it should be in a low area of the watershed. Of course, you've got constraints with respect to where you can put the dugout, because your land is, you only have a certain amount of land, and the watershed area is throughout the area, and so you can't really go to the lowest point in a watershed area. But as much as possible, the low areas will be able to capture more runoff than than you will find, in the entire watershed. So try to get it in the low area of your farm. Also, the other thing is that if it's a hilly area, there's runoff coefficients that you can use to calculate it. And quite obviously, you don't want to put it at the top of a knoll or a hill, but in a low area. You could have it near a waterway. If you have it near a waterway with the intention of filling that dugout from the waterway, you will have to get a license from Alberta Environment and Protected Areas to fill that dugout from the waterway. As always, you need to avoid valuable wetlands, and Angela will get into more of that later. A dugout should be designed to fill essentially 8 out of 10 years. So you want to design the size of the dugout so it's going to fill 8 out of 10 years. You want it in an open area, like that. Oh, sorry. You want it in an open area so that you have, this is an ideal dugout siting, where you have a grass around it, and you have a set of trees, but the set of trees are set back a certain distance. The trees will be good because they'll be able to, they're snow traps. But if the trees are too close to the dugout, that's when you have issues with respect to organics getting into the dugouts and fouling the dugout. So, what's recommended is a dugout is filled entirely with runoff water from the surrounding lands. You don't want a dugout to be constructed in a watercourse. That's not recommended. There are examples of it in Alberta, but it's not recommended because it will fill up with sediment, and very, very quickly it will not be a functional dugout. The other option, if you get environment approval, is for the dugout to be constructed near a watercourse or a water source, and inflow to the dugout can be controlled in that manner. These are the ideal dugout located situations. You don't want to have dugouts in areas that will cause pollution. So manure storage areas, near animal confinement areas, waste disposal sites, pesticide, fertilizer, and fuel storage areas, septic fields or septic tanks, saline sweeps, and you don't want dugouts having trees too close to the dugout. That will result in leaves, twigs, roots, and wind issues with respect to that dugout. Here's examples of poor siting. You can see here that you have organic matter intrusion, you have poor aeration, little wind action in this situation to provide oxygenation of the dugout, and you have nutrients from cultivated areas and yards, and of course you can start to see here nuisance organisms growing into the dugout. In this case, this looks like blue-green algae, typical grass clip appearance. You can see the dark colored water here, the twigs, etc. No defined geometry of the dugout. So we'll go into the design of the dugout in a bit. Ideal locations is you need the dugout to be close to where you're going to be using the water, close to dependable electrical power is preferable if you have that electrical power, and a lot of dugouts are using solar power nowadays for their pumping systems. The tree stands, which I talked about earlier, they help trap the snow and enable that snow to eventually run off into the dugout. And a desired location is also near other water sources. So a stream is an example of a good location for the dugout, so you can fill it from the stream, but not in the stream, obviously. And in that situation, you need environment's approval. So the catchment areas. You can see this is a good example of a dugout. So you need grassed waterways all the way around the dugout. That will keep it from erosion from getting into the dugout. You need vegetative filter strips, like you see here. And the vegetative filter strips will filter out the sediment from the runoff coming into the dugout. And it'll also trap snow, so when it melts, the snow will end up in the dugout. Maintain good cropping practices. And access for maintenance, repair, and monitoring. And inspection as well. Okay, so you need to do a water needs assessment before planning your dugout. And this publication here, which is now actually out of print, is this Quality Farm Dugouts publication. And you used to be able to pick up one of these flyers and order it. And it has a wealth of information, technical information on dugout design. After the COVID-19 pandemic, this is now out of print, and they're not printing anymore. It's all online now. But I have a few Quality Farm Dugouts handouts there that talk about what's in this manual. It's online now, and you can go online and look for it. So this manual has all of the information with respect to planning your dugout flow. This is just a snippet of the information that's available in this handbook. A cow-calf pair uses 12 imperial gallons a day. Dairy cows 30 imperial gallons a day. Swine, sows use 20 imperial gallons a day as an example. And you need to really, really plan your dugout very well. We have online calculators that you can look up on Google, and you just type in average daily and annual water requirements for dugouts in Alberta. And you'll be able to go to that calculator and you just plug in everything. Domestic use is 60 imperial gallons a day per person. So and of course, in planning your dugout, you need to talk to a water specialist from the province. All you have to do is call 310 farm, 7 digits only, put you through to a water specialist. A specialist from anywhere in the province can help you. It doesn't have to be any one of us specialists can provide assistance. So it's very important, therefore, to plan your dugout well. Other uses is spray for water crops, fire protection and garden watering for dugouts. So our funding program. A lot of people think that our funding program requires too large of a dugout, but that's not absolutely the case. People don't realize that when they're planning for a dugout, you need a 2-year drought supply. And that 2-year drought supply is a much larger size of dugout than they're wanting to build. So they don't, but that's something that we do recommend, especially in these times. So contact us at 310 Farm, and we'll help you determine what volume you need for your dugout. And I'll go through an example here on the calculation. So this is in the Quality Farm Dugouts Manual, and that's been recently updated to help calculate a 2-year drought supply. So at the start of year 1, you have your evaporation loss. It's year 1. It's full after spring runoff. You have your evaporation loss, water use for the first year. Start of year 2, you have your evaporation loss, water use for the second year, then you have your ice loss for the second year, and the start of year 3, you have the just available water and dead storage. So if you have 2 years of drought, you still have enough water in your dugout to supply your needs. So here's an example. If you want to calculate your annual needs, so 50 cow-calf pairs for 6 months, you would have 50 cow-calf pairs, 12 imperial gallons a day per pair. And for 180 days, that's 108,000 imperial gallons of annual usage. Then you go to your evaporation zone map. So the evaporation zone map will identify out of this how much this dugout will evaporate in your area. So we look at that map, and in our area we're in the green zone. In the red, near the Red Deer area is the green zone, and so we're able to identify how much bigger the dugout has to be to provide for the evaporation for your 2-year drought supply. So you need to choose the slopes and find a ratio of annual usage to calculate the drought supply volume. Evaporation is based on slope configuration. So in this situation, assume we have end slopes of 4:1, run over rise, and side slopes of 1.5:1, run over rise. And to find our ratio, evaporation ratio, we go to this chart here. And over here you can see that the annual water required is 108,000 gallons, so 0.1 million imperial gallons for the time that we need it. And we're in zone 2, so the multiplication factor is 4.1. So we go back to our chart, to our calculation, and we need 4.1 times the annual usage volume in this zone to account for evaporation. And as a result, we will need 442,000 imperial gallons dug out. That's the example calculation we go through for planning. This is a 2-year drought supply, accounting for evaporation and dead loss at the bottom of the dugout. And our provincial water specialists can help you with all of this stuff. Just call 310-FUN.
So just for clarification, are you saying that you need 4.1 times your annual volume so that you have evaporation plus consumption, or is that just for evaporation?
No, that's evaporation plus consumption plus 2-year drought supply. So it's 4.1 times your usage requirements. So you need 108,000 imperial gallons for 50 cow-calf pairs for 6 months. But to supply that 108,000 gallons, you need that much more for evaporation and 2-year drought supply. Once you know the required dugout drought-proof volume and slopes, you can determine the rest of your dimensions. And we have a dugout calculator that you can look up and plug in your numbers to get the top length, width, depth of your dugout. Okay, geometry of dugouts. Obviously, this is not going to work very well. So, so you want to make sure that your slopes are 0 to 1 slopes are going to have 100% failure rate. And the spoil from your dugout has to be at least 15 feet from the edge to prevent erosion of the sides. 1.5 to 1 slopes, like you see here, are in most acceptable soil conditions. we'll talk about soil conditions later, are the very desirable and maintain a good geometry of the dugout. If you have it too shallow, then there's issues with respect to fouling of the dugout from vegetation, etc., erosion, etc. So 1.5 to 1 is most acceptable in the soil conditions. Steeper slopes result in less weeds, less evaporation, and helps for cooler and better water quality, but not too steep to prevent sloughing. The slide slopes typically are 1.5 to 1, and the end slopes are typically 4 to 1, or you can have just one end slope at 4 to 1, with the other slopes at 1.5 to 1. And this enables escape, just for safety, in case a human being or an animal gets into the dugout, they can get out. Need a bottom width of at least 10 feet for sedimentation, and at least 13 feet deep. Now, in the process for your SCAP funding, Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership funding, you'll be submitting your geometry and your design for your dugout to a water specialist, and the water specialist will go through that with you. He or she will identify if you need approval from Alberta Environment and Protected Areas. He will also identify if it meets our guidelines, and you will get an acceptance of that design, and you can go ahead and build your dugout. And then you would apply for your 25% cost share funding with the receipts after you've finished that dugout. So you need to get acceptance from a water specialist before you proceed with your dugout. And if you require environment approval, you need to get that before you proceed with your dugout. Okay, design runoff potential. You need to have a runoff watershed that will fill a dugout of this size 8 out of every 10 years. So it has to be sited and located in an area that you're going to get it filling 8 out of 10 years. Now that's a challenge in the time of drought. In time of drought, obviously, if you can't get that, then you're going to have to reduce the usage from that dugout during drought times. So you determine the area of runoff watershed and the characteristics of the land. We'll do an example here of how much land do you need to fill your dugout. So in that Quality Farm Dugouts manual, and a lot of study has been done on this, we have different parts of the prairie areas that have different runoff potential. In our situation, we're located here just west of Red Deer in the green zone here. So that green zone requires 50 to 100 acres to fill a 1 million gallon dugout. And that's a key factor to look at in your design for the runoff area. So a common thought is to construct a dugout in a low area where water sits, but some low areas don't have a lot of water in them. So you need to consult with a water specialist on your siting of that dugout. And many people think that building in wetlands is needed in a time of drought, but there are alternatives to that, and of course, wetlands are protected now by Alberta Environment and Protected Areas. So if you're in the rare circumstance you're ever considering building in a wetland, you need to consult with Environment and Protected Areas before you proceed any further. So going back to this example, so we see in the map that the average area, we required 441,000 cubic meter dugout, which is 0.44 million imperial gallons. And then in this requires 50 to 100 acres per 1 million imperial gallons to fill that dugout. So an average watershed area is therefore 75 acres times 0.44 million imperial gallons. You'll need 33 acres of watershed area to fill your dugout. And we can help you with that calculation. For safety, you need to have at least one flatter slope to be able to get out. Install a flotation device in your dugout. You need to have fencing to prevent animals from getting into the dugout, and I'll talk more about that later. You need off-site watering systems. And if there's any visitors to your farm, make sure you talk to the visitors about safety issues with dugouts. Ideally, you'd have a 2 dugout system, one sedimentation dugout, and you pump out and clean one of the dugouts at a time, and you'd have in situ treatment, and then transfer to the second dugout. This is a typical drawing of an example of a 2 dugout system where you'd have one sedimentation dugout, 1.5 to 1 side slopes, and you'd have rock riprap around both of your dugouts. In this situation, it's a gated culvert drawing water from a nearby stream. So obviously you'd have to have approval from Alberta Environment for this. And then you'd have a gated culvert going from one to the next. And this is the supply dugout. And you can see that the livestock are excluded. So the watering container is here, far away from the dugout, and the livestock don't have access to get into the dugout. This is an ideal system. You have grass buffers all the way around. You have a shelter belt, what's known as a shelter belt here. So you can trap your snow in the winter, and you'd have filtration happening in the summer from the runoff, so not too much sedimentation will come into it. So this is an ideal situation for a 2 dugout system. Spoil piles, remember, they have to be 15 feet from the edge to prevent sloughing of the slopes. And they act as a berm to prevent multiple entry points for runoff and protect against wind erosion. Now, construction. So soil testing is part of the construction. You've got to make sure that the dugout is going to hold water. It's not made pure of sand and the water just goes straight down. So you need ideally fine grained material like clay, low percentage of coarse grained soils, and you need to dig test holes 4 feet deeper than the excavation depth, and test the soils to make sure that it's located in the right soil conditions. A bit on groundwater dugouts. Groundwater dugouts are typically not recommended. There's a potential to contaminate the aquifer because you're going to have surface runoff coming in. If you have manure or oil spills, etc., they'll bring it into the dugout, and from there it will go into the groundwater aquifer. So that's not recommended. We consider a shallow well instead, like a spring development. So this is an example of just a drawing of how contamination can get into the aquifer from a groundwater fed dugout. This is an example of a spring development. And we have a fact sheet online. It's a spring development fact sheet, Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation. If you have a groundwater flow and a spring, you can convert that into a spring development that provides you with water. Excavating equipment, typically track hoes are used, 60-foot width plus, most efficient, easy to transport. You have crawler tractors or dozers. They enter and exit out the ends. 2-to-1 side slopes are steepest that they can do. Scrapers and buggies, and they're also used. You can have liners, although they're costly. Typically, the best liner to have is clay lining, 1.5 to 3 feet thick and packed. And you can also add 20% sodium chloride to it, and that would prevent your dugout from seeping. Plastic liners, are good, but they do develop holes with time. The other option is a cutoff curtain around the dugout, and a sand liner or thicker liner. If you put the plastic liner under your dugout, then you have sand or a thicker liner above it. You can use bentonite, which expands. It's a clay material that expands with the addition of water. And older dugouts have used something known as glyzation. Glyzation is a 6-inch thick straw layer with 6 inches of clay compacted on top. And what happens is that the straw layer decomposes over time and results in an impermeable layer due to biological organisms that are within that decomposed straw layer that will prevent the water from going through.
If you were to use that, you'd have to have a lot flatter slope.
Yeah.
You couldn't use that.
Yes, as you can see, these side slopes typically look like 4-to-1. And your side slopes will be shallower in this situation if you're going to be using liners. Typically, in Alberta soils, Alberta soils are generally impermeable. So by and large, when you go 13 feet deep, which is the recommended minimum depth, you're going to get your clays and your silts more likely than not.
I guess I'm just worried about hitting a sand layer after I spent the money and digging 13 feet.
Yeah, so you need to do a test hole, as we talked about. You do a test hole below the maximum depth of the dugout, and you'd get a professional to, or you get a professional to come and evaluate that. You can do a soil sieve analysis, send that soil samples to the lab from various zones, and identify whether there's any really permeable zones that you come across.
How would you do that test hole?
Oh, a test hole is a backhoe. You don't need to do a drill hole. You can actually have a backhoe, test hole with the backhoe.
It can reach 16 feet?
Yeah, I think it can, yeah. And you can go down that way. The other option is to do a borehole. And then get a drilling contractor to do a borehole and identify your soil horizons like you would do when you're drilling a well. But you need to do your research beforehand to identify your soil zones to make sure that that dugout is not going to seep and it's just not going to, the water's not going to disappear on you.
If you, sorry
Yeah.
to ask another question.
Yeah.
If you happen to hit a poor layer way down there, let's say you get 13 feet down, can you just then do a liner at that zone? You don't have to line all the way up? do a lower slope then?
Yeah, there's various options, absolutely, absolutely. And you need to get a technical expert to be able to provide that advice to you of how to just line that particular area at that depth. But yeah, this is all part of the planning. So what you've said is excellent, because now you've identified the potential issues where water can get away from your dugout. And dugouts have been in place since the 70s. Good performing dugouts have been in place since the 70s. So if it's well placed, it holds water, and there's enough runoff to feed the dugout, you could have a good water supply for a long time. Okay, now we go to operating systems. So we're talking here about off-source watering. For reasons I'm going to talk about later, we don't want cattle getting into the dugout. That was an age-old practice a very, very long time ago. We don't want any cattle going into the dugout. So you want to keep the cattle away, you want to fence the dugout, and have an off-site watering system such as this. In this particular case, we have an intake. It's a perforated intake. And sometimes there's a filter sock on top of it. It's got a float to keep it near the top of the dugout where the water quality is the best. It has a nylon rope to a pillar, a post, so that it remains in place. There's a flexible hose going away from the dugout, and a protective cover pipe, one size larger than the intake line, that goes to this wet well here. And you'd have a submersible pump here with a pitless adapter, and then going to a pipe which goes into your tank, or goes into your cattle waterer. And you need it to be below the frost line. So in Alberta, that would be 8.5 feet deep, to make sure that it's not going to freeze. The power for this submersible pump can come from various sources. It could be electrical power, but you could also now, there's a very, very efficient solar power systems, windmill power systems that are available, or a combination of them. You'd also want to make sure that your battery systems are kept warm, and so that they can provide the power to your submersible pump, regularly. A lot of farmers now in the drought situation, they're putting in pipelines, low diameter pipelines. A lot of them are gravity fed, especially the ranchers and so on. If they have a big ranch and they have one really good dugout, they want to supply their animals with water far away. What they do is install gravity pipeline systems, and we can help you with that, as well as pumped pipeline systems. And of course, they're eligible for funding as well. The pipeline systems, as well as off-source watering, is all eligible for funding. We'll talk about that later. You can pull this intake out, like they show on the top picture here, for cleaning. Intake examples, typically, a floating intake near the top, like this one. And we also have examples like this one, where it's like a homemade intake with holes and filter fabric, etc. But having a good intake is near the top provides you with best water quality. A bottom intake is not recommended. neither are gravel infiltration trenches, because that's where your sediment collects, that's where any treatment chemicals that you're going to use to remove contaminants from the dugout are going to collect. That's where the biological growth occurs, so you get most risk of contamination from your bottom intakes and your gravel infiltration trenches. You don't want to locate your trenches over there, your intake over there. So this is an example of direct watering, and it happened a lot in the past in our province, but we're recommending against that now. The dugout's going to have a lower lifespan because of erosion into the dugout. You're going to have manure getting into the dugout, increase of nutrients, poor water quality, cattle health problems, toxins. They're drinking right from the dugout, where you can get blue-green algae growing, which release toxins into the water. You're going to have foot rot, stressed animals, because they find it difficult to actually climb down into the dugout to get the water. And I've not mentioned it here, but you can also get animals getting stuck in the mud and not being able to come out. You get loss of storage volume and environmental habitat loss. So all of these issues, you don't want your cattle watering directly out of the dugout. We talked about off-source watering systems, and you want to exclude the livestock from the dugout, and you want to ensure that the manure from the livestock runs away from the dugout. So that's one purpose of the off-site watering system. You can have stock tanks for winter and summer watering, pumping systems. Solar systems are gaining more and more traction nowadays, and we have a list of suppliers in Alberta, a comprehensive list of suppliers. And so if you want a list of solar system suppliers, we can provide that to you. And you can investigate their capabilities and examples of solar systems for off-site watering. Wind powered is also taking off. They have batteries and large tanks, especially in the windy areas of the province. You can have dual solar and wind. You can have gravity-fed off-site watering systems. And then you have off-site water systems that are activated by nose pumps. The cattle would have a nose pump that they activate, and that will provide them with water. There's a fact sheet on off-site watering systems for livestock. I have a few fact sheets on the front table here, so if you're interested, you can grab a paper copy of the fact sheet, or you can just get it online. Off-source watering systems for livestock in Alberta, and you get that fact sheet. I've also got, as I mentioned earlier, some pamphlets that talk about what's in this Quality Farm Dugouts manual, so you can pick one of those up and get it online. You can print it off at home. So for winter watering, you can have motion detectors that the water gets pumped to a small bowl only when needed. Low exposure tanks, small holes in the tank that the cattle can drink out of, with the majority of the tank insulated. Geothermal heat has been used. We have some deeper buried vertical tanks and natural circulation of heat that's insulated from the top. You want to make sure that your batteries are protected from the cold, and you want to make sure you have deeper buried lines, at least 8.5 feet if it's further away. So, and these are, all of these, watering systems are eligible for funding. Here's examples of them. This is the nose pump I was talking about. Some cattle have to learn it, how to use it, but once they see other cattle using it, they catch on pretty quick. This is a windmill system here. So, okay. Go through part one, we got the references. I mentioned the Quality Farm Dugouts Manual. We've got the Dugout Lagoon Calculator. Off-site Watering Systems Livestock Fact Sheet. Average Daily and Annual Water Requirements Calculator. We've got various fact sheets from Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation, as well as from the old PFRA on all of these subjects. And the federal government has a good set of fact sheets that you can look up. And if you need links to these, you just call 310 Farm. You have a fact sheet on the Water Act, applicable to dugouts from environment and protected areas. And any questions, call 310 Farm. This is the end of part one. So you can take a 5-minute break maybe, and then we can get on to part two. If you have any questions, you can ask them. Go ahead.
The only question, you mentioned in the lot, if you had to build a clean liner mixing 20% NAC.
That's right.
That's table salt.
Yes, 20% say table salt. There's a fact sheet on that I can send you. And that will improve it'll decrease the permeability.
Sound chemistry, I just was surprised at wanted to.
Yeah.
You have a yard of clay there, you have to put in.
Oh yeah.
A fifth of the yard of salt.
Yeah, but it's not, there's many options. It's not just that. That's one of the options. Yeah, but there's, clay, liners, etc., glyzation, all of those are used. Not in this workshop. I'm not talking about dams, but we do have a presentation on dams. Not on this one. And there's fact sheets on dams that I can send you. Yeah. You were.
Yes.
ancient lakes, a very good source of water. We've got to get the water tested from that. We've got to make sure that the water is, before calls, people in farm, talk to me or another water specialist, say you want to draw on this lake. And you know, maybe we can apply for a run for an approval for that. They probably give you an approval based on the need. Take water from that, and it's not being used. It's a huge source of water. You've heard that, right? So, you grew up in England or Australia? Oh, okay. Australia. Yeah. Okay, we should get started in the interest of time. So if you can find your seat, and we'll do part 2. Yes. Yeah, both. I think the answer is good quality supply as well. But if you need, you have lots of runoff, and then in your specific situation, calls we can find, you are another specialist who go through the advantages and disadvantages of both of them. Okay, so I'm going to get going in a couple of minutes. Okay, so I just wanted to make honorable mention for Sean Eldred, my colleague. He's out of Barhead, and he helped me with this presentation. I'm presenting it, but we worked on this presentation together. So Sean couldn't be here, so just an honorable mention to Sean. Okay, so part 2, we're going to talk about maintenance of dugouts and water quality and treatment, water quality of dugouts and treatments in dugouts. Nutrient buildup. Over the years, dugouts, just from their very nature, sludge is going to build up in them. They're going to contain sediments, dead biological matter, precipitates from runoff water and treatment chemicals. These contain nutrients that promote growth of algae, and particularly blue-green algae. And blue-green algae is actually not an algae, it's a bacteria known as cyanobacteria, and it releases deadly neurological toxins. You don't want to have blue-green algae growth, but it's very common in Alberta. And of course, lots of plant growth in dugouts. I'm going to talk about how to prevent some of this happening. So you have your new dugout at the top, uniform slopes and depth, little or no algae or weed growth. And then the one at the bottom is a 20-year-old dugout. You can see that sediment and decayed plant material has grown at the bottom. The slide slopes have gone. You have submergent and emergent vegetation and weeds. You have algae growth, a host of issues with respect to these dugouts. So you need to keep them inspected, and you need to keep them clean and treated for all of these issues to make sure that you have a good quality supply of runoff water. Every 10 years, typically, you need to remove all of the accumulated material in the dugout, depending on the rate of buildup. Track hose are common machines that are used for this. You remove the sludge layer and deeper deposition at the bottom and sides, and you remove that excessive plant growth because there's competition. The moment you have a source of water and you have nutrients, you'd have all types of competition from all the different types of plants that want to colonize that dugout. And they cause pollution issues and water quality issues for your cattle. Often slopes have sloughed in because of these issues. Here's an example of a clean out of a dugout. You can see, you know, a huge piece of equipment is getting all that sludge and sediment and rubbish out of the bottom of that dugout. Regularly inspect your dugout. Are the slopes deteriorating due to muskrats, cattle gaining access, sloughing? Does the water have color, turbidity, algae, plant growth? Does it have smells of various sorts? You need to actually really keep your dugout inspected to make sure you have optimum water quality here. Check if your aeration system and pumps and intakes are working well. Are buffer areas damaged? Quite often the buffer areas, you know, the tree areas that prevent this sediment from coming in with your runoff, you know, have they been damaged, or are they, you may need to plant more trees in the buffer area. Proper siting, design, and construction can prevent problems later on. And good consultation with water specialists at Alberta Irrigation to really get all of your planning and pre-construction work done well. Dead animals in the dugout, that sometimes happens. In the past, when there was, you know, no off-site watering systems, obviously you remove the animal and don't use chlorine bleach, which kills aquatic life and the health of the dugout. You can use coagulation treatment. We'll talk about that later. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Use the best management practices to prevent nutrients or other contaminants from entering the dugout. You'd have gated culverts that we saw earlier in that drawing, weirs, berms to divert poor quality water, and buffer strips, those trees that we saw, riprap on the slopes, and construct off of a stream, not in the stream. You need to really identify the problem first before diving into the treatment. You know, because otherwise it's just a band-aid treatment. Without determining what the problem is, you may do more harm than good with the treatment. Understand the appropriate treatment for each specific problem. We'll go through some examples here. Blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, plant growth, other algae growth, macro and filamentous spawn scum, anoxic conditions in the dugout, low oxygen, chemical constituents from runoff, dissolved organic content, all of those are issues in a dugout. And we look at some of the problems that these cause, some of the issues here, and some of the solutions that you might be able to implement. So you need to identify, you need to do your water analyses. A standard set, a suite of chemistry, water analysis for your dugout. Biological water analysis to identify cyanobacteria, blue-green algae, find what their count is, what their toxins are. Fecal coliforms from cows obviously can get into the dugout, and Giardia and Cryptosporidium as well, which are, which are harmful, which are toxic, of course, to both humans and animals. We have a rural water quality information tool. It's called ROCKET for short, and determines suitability for usage and deals with the common contaminants found in dugouts. And it's available online, so you can go in and play with that raw water quality information tool. This is it's done in partnership with Agriculture and Agri-Feed Canada, as well as the Alberta government. And you can do your testing, and you put in your numbers, and they'll help you identify what the causes of your contamination is. Here's some of the examples of the chemistry that you can analyze: alkalinity, arsenic, calcium, chloride, coliforms, fecal coliforms, total coliforms, fluoride, hardness, iron, nitrate, nitrite, sodium sulfate, total dissolved solids, and pH. But there's a whole suite of parameters in this ROCKET water tool. And I would say once every 5 years you should get your dugout tested and analyzed for these chemical parameters. Call 310 Farm and run this information through the water specialist and identify what the problems are with your dugout and what the potential solutions could be. So, plant and algae identification. You really need to have a good handle on what plant and algae growth is happening in your dugouts. We have guides to identify that from AAFC and ALMS, and they're in the bibliography at the end, or you can look them up on Google. Submergent and partially submerged vegetation, chlorophyll, hydrophyll, duckweed is partly submerged vegetation, and emergent vegetation like cattails and bulrush, floating vegetation like water lilies, all happen in dugouts. You really need to identify what plant material is in your dugout.
What would be a good plant?
Ideally, no plants. No plants for your dugout are a good plant because they're going to foul your dugout. And they'll only grow more and more. You'd have to get rid of them. So we'll come up in a bit with options to remove this plant material.
I thought a sign of cattails was a healthy sign.
Oh, it's not a poisonous. A cattail is not poisonous to your animals, but it will take up water. Additional water will be taken up. It'll evaporate water, evapotranspiration through the plant. It will fill up your dugout. So ideally, you don't want those plants in there. So cyanobacteria, commonly called blue-green algae. So the cyan is the blue-green color. Many species of this bacteria exist. There's a pea soup appearance, a grass clipping appearance, a globular appearance. It's slimy. If it's slimy, it may be blue-green algae. There's various types of blue-green algae, and they have one common thing, and they produce toxins that are deadly to your cows, nerve toxins. Visual identification with a water specialist. You can test for the cell ID in a lab. You can test for the microcystin toxins. You get a sample of the water. If you think it's blue-green algae, you can run that sample to a lab and get a microcystin analysis. If they have microcystins, for sure you have blue-green algae there. And a percentage of them produce liver and nerve toxins. So here's an example. This is microcystins or anabina. This is a green one. And you can see it looks like grass clippings floating on the surface of your dugout. Again, this is another one called aphanizomenon. And again, they look like grass clippings as well, on top, floating on top of your dugout. This is just an example in Lake Muriel in northern Alberta. Was this pink cyanobacteria called Planktothrix, and there was an infestation throughout the lake of this pink material. You can get that in dugouts too. Euglena. Now Euglena is very interesting in the sense that it looks like cyanobacteria, but apparently this bacteria is neither a plant or an animal, or it is both a plant and an animal. A very interesting species. It can come in red and blue and green. Sorry, red and green. Looks like cyanobacteria, bright lime green or red.
Is that toxic?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, it's toxic. Don't want to go anywhere near that. You know, that release toxins. Also, a lot of the cyanobacteria release toxins. You don't want to take a chance. Close up of Euglena, the green one. So, treatment. And fine bubble diffuser is the best way to go about treating for cyanobacteria and other toxins in your dugout. And a membrane diffuser is the best option for you. It will produce the smallest bubble size and oxygenate the water so that all of these materials are oxygenated and removed from your dugout. This is a coarse bubble diffuser you can use as well, but this produces mostly bigger bubbles that don't, the dissolved oxygen content from these bigger bubbles is less than you can get from these very fine bubbles in a membrane diffuser. And you want circulation of air throughout the dugout. Locate the diffuser at the bottom to maintain consistent oxygen levels throughout. So, blue-green algae. You can use copper products. Most granular forms of bluestone, like copper sulfate, are no longer registered under the Pest Management Regulatory Association of Health Canada. There should still be one granular registered available through the Federated Co-op. Liquid forms of copper are now available that can be used, that are registered with this agency. You only need a low concentration if you're using a liquid copper product. You can do spot treatments or treat the top 1 meter of your dugout. Often it's over applied. You've got to get an expert to apply it. And this material, it will break open the blue-green algae cell and release the toxins. So if you're going to be doing copper treatment for blue-green algae, you need to remove the cattle from that access to that dugout for at least 3 weeks. Examples of these copper products, and of course, we're not advocating for any of these are just examples, but Cutrine Plus, Algae Boss, Polydex, Think Purity are examples of copper treatment products that you can use. Another treatment for cyanobacteria is hydrated lime. Now this works to lock away the cells while they slowly degrade at the bottom. This can also be used as a secondary treatment after copper to remove nutrients so that regrowth doesn't occur. So hydrated lime is another water quality treatment for cyanobacteria. Filamentous algae, most of them are resistant to copper, but hydrated lime works well for filamentous algae. You can treatment to reduce nutrients, directly kill the algae are used. You need to properly identify the algae in order to prescribe proper treatment, but hydrated lime is a good source of treatment for these. Turbidity and nutrient removal. Those, you require coagulants. So hydrated lime and aluminum sulfate are very good for removal of turbidity, that murky water, muddy water. And they will bind with the dirt particles and make them into a big flock and remove them they'll settle out because they're heavy as a flock, and they'll settle to the bottom, resulting in clear water in your dugout. You can also use, these are good as a 1-2 punch, so you could use hydrated lime and aluminum sulfate applied at separate times as a 1-2 punch, and you really get good clear water in your dugout.
How far apart would you do that?
2 weeks. Typically 2 weeks. But I can get your exact number. You can call me at 310 Farm. I can look that up.
You have another question here.
Yeah, sure.
So are any attempts been made at using biological control methods for these problems instead of just applying chemicals? Has research been done in that area?
I'm sure it has. I'm sure it has been done in this area.
So just from my personal experience, Burnstick Lake, which most of you may know of, is a lake, sort of west of Caroline and south of Caroline. It's got a huge amount of water lilies in every year. It comes back every year, and I would suggest it's one of the most healthy lakes around.
Okay.
So to me that says something about the viability or possible biological control methods to make the water healthy rather than pouring the chemicals on it, which is a traditional way of doing it.
Yes, a very good point. There are some research articles on biological water quality treatment, and we can get those to you. But it's not it's definitely out there, but it's not in any of our manuals right now. Our manuals just have this chemical treatment, but you're right. There are biological ways to remove this material as well.
When you apply the aluminum sulfate and your cattle are drinking from it, does that provide too much sulfate for them taking up like water and the micronutrients?
Well, what you do is, at any time you have these treatments that are applied, you want to make sure that you apply the hydrated lime and then you wait for 2 weeks, apply the aluminum sulfate, and allow time for the water to clarify. And then your intake would be near the surface, like we showed, the floating intake, just below the surface. So you'd want to make sure that the water is clarified first before you allow access to your cattle to that particular dugout.
Right, so I'm not talking about the flock, I'm talking about the sulfate in the water, because too much sulfate for cattle.
Well, what you do is you'd identify what you would identify what the contaminant load is of the plant material, what your total suspended solids are in this water, And you would only apply the dose that you need to remove those suspended solids. So you don't have any residual sulfate, aluminum sulfate hanging around in your water. You don't overdose. If you overdose, you'll have sulfate problem. You'll have them taking in sulfate. You only apply what you need.
Okay, so how do you find out how much you need?
You call a 310 farm.
Okay, and send them a water sample.
Yes, you set up a water sample, and then we'll get you the right dosage to help you make sure that you've got the adequate amount of chemical, but not too much chemical. And there are companies you can hire to do this as well. Other one is ferric chloride and ferric sulfate that are used. This is a bit labor intensive. You can see a lot of people here doing this work. And you know, there is a cost element to it. But if you have a big dugout and you want to keep that dugout healthy, this is something that you need to do once in 10 years. Make sure that you have proper gear and safety. There's some of these coagulants are quite caustic, and health and safety is an issue with these coagulants. You can hire a contractor, as I just talked about, who have done it time and time again, and you know, it's a little bit more expensive, but you make sure that you get the job well done. Each of those coagulants has its strengths and weaknesses, and we can identify those to you. The other one is to use colorants, like food grade colorants. Dye blocks, you can put dye blocks into your dugout, and they will prevent UV light from getting into your dugout. And they will inhibit aquatic plant growth, because plants don't have UV light. Their UV light is absorbed by these dye blocks. And so the plants don't have any UV light to then to photosynthesize. If more runoff gets in, you may have to retreat it with this dye block. You know, apply it before the growth season. And an example is Aquashade, Wavex, etc. Some of these are the products that are used for this. Aquatic herbicides can be used. Again, it's a chemical, you know, and effective on many submergent and emergent aquatic plants. It's not effective on most types of algae. You may want to make sure that these products are approved for use in Canada. So again, you'd call 310 Farm and we'd be able to help you to see if it's approved in Canada. And you know, examples of these are Reglone A and Reward. Some of these products, aquatic herbicides that you can use.
How soon after you apply that can you cattle grow?
We have a fact sheet on those products. You know, the products themselves have spec sheets that will be able to look up and identify how long after that you keep your cattle away from the dugout to make sure that it doesn't affect your cattle. So there's no magic bullets. These are all good ways of treating your dugout. And if you identify the problem and identify the right solution, it's better than just going ahead with treatment without doing enough research on what the problem is. Make an informed decision by gathering all the information at the outset. That'll prevent you from you know, a stitch in time saves 9. So proper research at the beginning will enable you to identify the problem and get the right solution without having to go back to the problem again. I got this one slide on from general water quality criteria for fish. If you want to stock your dugout with fish for recreational purposes. Some dugouts are used for commercial purposes, but few and far between. And this is Fish and Wildlife have this maximum concentrations of these chemical parameters in your dugout, so that such that it is fish are able to live in your dugout. Needless to say, proper siting, design, and construction can prevent problems later on. And here's some of the reference materials I was talking to you about earlier. You can get all of these reference materials from the internet or from Agriculture and Irrigation, 310 Farm. So there's the Quality Farm Dugouts Manual, the Dugout Lagoon Volume Calculator, the Rural Water Quality Information Tool, hydrated line fact sheets, and fact sheets actually for all of those chemicals that we talked about, Algae Identification Field Guide, the Aquatic Plants of Alberta, etc. That's the end of part 2. And if you have any questions, go ahead.
Where would you access the lab? Like, what are the labs that you use to test water?
Any commercial lab will be able to provide this information to you.
Examples?
Um,
Are there any in Central Alberta?
yes, there are. I can get you a list of those.
Are there any things to consider differently if you're talking about treating a dugout, if the dugout is connected to like a creek or groundwater?
Yeah, I mean, if it's connected to a creek if it's connected to a creek, you don't want it to be connected to groundwater because obviously you don't want to contaminate the aquifer. But if you're connected to a creek, typically you'll have a gated culvert. So you can shut off that flow from the creek into the dugout, isolate the dugout or the two dugout system, treat it, make sure that all the sediment is gone, the water is clear, and then continue influent from the creek coming in. Okay, and any questions, please call 310 Farm. You can talk to any one of the farm's water specialists. And we encourage you to ask all the questions that you have. Because, you need to be as knowledgeable in this subject area before you go ahead and construct your dugout.
Perfect. Thank you, Pravez.
Thank you.
Next presentation here, and just before that, I'll mention that if anybody would like that dugout, farm dugout manual printed, we can go and see Jaylene at the back table, and we can print some at the Clearwater County office and get them to you, because these used to be readily available, and as he mentioned, they're not as easy to come by, so we can print them off for you if anybody would like that. So just get your name at the back office and we can get them printed and let you know when they're all ready to go. Next we'll move on to Angela Fulton. She's our water approvals team leader with Alberta Environment and Protected Areas, and she's going to be touching on everything to know on the Water Act and how it applies to you on the farm and with dugouts. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Angela Fulton, and I'm with the Red Door Office of Alberta Environment and Protected Areas now. I've been out of the Red Door Office for over 30 years. There's a question and answer at the end, so please ask questions. We have a phone number, not 310 Farm, but in Red Deer it's 403-340-7052, and I do have a slide for that too, okay? The Water Act has been around in Alberta since the early 1900s. Most recently, the Water Act was proclaimed in 1999. In that time, we did a traditional agricultural use registration for agriculture, a one-time registration. Some of you may have done that, and if not, unfortunately, it's over. It was only for a 2 or 3 year period in the early 2000s. So today, I'll be talking more about what you need for when you construct a dugout and a license, if you need that as well. Okay? So the Water Act, its purpose is to support and promote conservation management, wise use of water, a healthy economy for Alberta, and to manage and conserve our water to sustain it for the future. Activities that require Water Act approval. So legislatively, the Act states that in order to undertake an activity, you need it if you're going to alter the flow or level of a water body, change the direction or flow of the water, and if you may cause siltation or erosion, and finally, if you're capable of, the activity you're doing is capable of causing an effect on the aquatic environment. So very broad, very general, but it was meant to cover a lot of activity, and as we drill down, we then become, as you specify what your activity is, that will dictate whether or not you need an approval from us. You do need an approval to construct and maintain a dugout, only in these circumstances. So not every dugout construction needs an approval from the department. So if you're locating the dugout in a water course that has fish or is in a lake or a wetland, if your dugout will change the flow of water on an adjacent parcel of land, if it has a capacity greater than 2,500 cubic meters, or is located in the same water course and parcel of land as an existing dugout. So basically for a second dugout. You only need a license under the Water Act to divert and use the water. So the following slide will tell you what type, only in certain quantities. So not every person that's going to use water requires a license from a dugout. Okay? The license will authorize the water source, location, the volume, rate and timing, and every license in Alberta has a priority date, so that priority occurs on the date that you make your application. And water for firefighting purposes is exempt.
Pardon?
Water for firefighting is exempt. You just go ahead and use water in case of fire.
Angela, can you hold your mic a little
Oh,
closer?
sorry, thanks. I meant to do that. Okay, now this is the only time you need a license from us. In these cases, when you're diverting from a dugout. If your total diversion is more than 6,250 cubic meters per year, and it's approximately 250 cal-cap pairs for 6 months. If your dugout is going to be larger than 12,500 cubic meters, if you pump water into your dugout, if your dugout is located in a water course that has fish in it, or in a lake, or in a wetland. If your dugout is in the same water course and parcel of land as an existing dugout, then you need a license. So second dugout. And lastly, if your diversion water is restricted by an approved water management plan, but there isn't any in this county. So before you apply, you can call us or come into the Red Door office. Pervez and I are actually on the same floor in the provincial building. So if you're coming to see one of us, you can see both of us as well if you like. Or you can email us or make an appointment. Oh, yeah, sorry. So you can get that. Okay. Information that's required for an approval application is proof of land ownership, your dugout volume, including length, width, and the depth. We do have online diagrams for that, so typically if we email you or provide that to you, we can make it just easier for you to just put down your dugout dimensions. You also need to let us know if you're going to impact any surrounding water bodies, and depending on the size of your dugout, any surrounding landowners. If the other item is if you proposed your works impact an adjacent landowner or the municipality's infrastructure like a road, you have to provide written consent of that person. Yes?
This is a kind of a general question relating to energy. The energy sector's usage of these huge storage dams on private land. One example being a 300,000 cubic meter reservoir in the Airedale area south of Rocky Mountain House, constructed maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. Were you involved in any of the approval process for that, or was that all done by the AER?
The AER, in 2013, the Alberta Energy Regulator was, I'll say, formed, and since 2013 it's been handled by the Energy Regulator.
And the point I'd like to make is I don't think there is any consultation process involved with adjacent landowners in their approval process. Is that right?
They do have a public notice requirement for all their energy-related activities. But, however, they post it on their website. I'm not sure if they post it in the local newspaper. But you could certainly call them to find out that. I'm just not certain if it's in the local paper or not. If we did it, it would be in the local paper. That's one of our typical things that we do. We would post it on our website. We would do a newspaper, and we would probably, for the size of that activity you're saying, we probably would have them do adjacent landowner notice as well. This one is for information that's required if you need a license. So again, proof of ownership, the water source, the location of your site, the volume of water, impacts on the surrounding water bodies again, and landowners. And again, if your water management works are going to impact an adjacent landowner or the municipal's infrastructure, you need written consent. We have an electronic digital application system now, and it's called the Digital Regulatory Assurance System. And in order to apply, you are required to get a individual alberta.ca account, or for business, My Alberta Digital ID. But if you contact us, we can help you with those websites as well. And I do have some fact sheets in the back of the room too, if you like, because that'll help you with these acronyms and all this naming. Okay? I do have to let you know that if you see a non-compliance, you can report it to our 1-800 number. And it's similar to your question, anytime you see non-compliance, this number gets us to ourselves and the energy regulator.
Just to let folks know, there is a problem in that system, because if you have a concern about water diversions for major water courses during the winter time, the flow is not monitored, so there's no knowledge of how much water, if it's at the critical level where you should not withdraw water or not, nobody knows. And that's a problem with this problem.
Okay. And this concludes my presentation. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. This is the contact information as well. You can, again, contact us, email me, call us, or drop in the office. Yes?
What would be the definition of a wetland?
Typically, wetlands are less than 2 meters deep. It's also the soil.
What's
So
less than 2 meters deep?
the-
How big is the water?
the depth of the water in a typical year, less than 2 meters deep. And the soils have to be a certain type as well, and the type of vegetation that are natural in it.
Who gets to decide this?
Typically, you have a qualified professional. If you're not sure, you should hire a qualified professional to see if it is a wetland. Yes?
So if an oil company is pumping out of a creek and it's affecting me next door, they're supposed to notify me? Is that correct? Like they're pumping out to fill a dugout and then they pump out of the dugout to fill the tracks. And it's taking our water away for cattle.
You should call that 1-800 number, and then it will be assigned to someone at the energy regulator who will look at your concern.
But I'm asking, they're supposed, like you were saying, they're supposed to let us know?
I can't speak for them, but it would be good practice to let you know. Yes?
Could you real quick talk about the licensing or approval requirements for wells, new wells?
Oh, yes, sure. If you have a groundwater well, you need a license. There aren't any different kind of criteria that you need, so anytime you're using water from a groundwater well, for any purpose, you need a license. Yes?
Would you be able to go back to your first slide?
Sure.
The next one, sorry. Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Yes?
On the groundwater well license, does that stay with the property if it's sold, or once it's sold, does that expire and expire?
It stays with the land. But if you're purchasing a new property and it has a license, you should transfer it to your name.
And that would be done through your,
Yes. Yeah. We have something called the Authorization Bureau that you could check by land location to see if there's a license or an approval for that land location. Yes?
The groundwater well license, is there, if it is for household use only, up to 1,250 cubic meters a year,
Right.
and there's an exemption for that?
Right. Household purpose is exempt up to 1,250 cubic meters. For watering, for household use, livestock, and for spraying.
Sorry, what?
So every person who has a well or water source, not necessarily a well, but for the household purpose exemption is up to 1,250 cubic meters. For house use, animals, and spraying.
so what do you mean by exemption? You don't need a license?
You don't need a license for a household purpose.
Okay.
In regards of usage, or what are you?
And how much, where, and is there any information on flow or?
We know where they're located in the formation, and the science shows that some of those aquifers are more prolific than others. I'm not a geologist, but we do have information that I can find for you.
I can also come see you later. I can give me a number, and I can send you web links for the Groundwater Information Center and other web links to talk about water availability in aquifers. We have a number of links that you can go to.
Okay, this is leading to, we all know the levels of the rivers are dropping. So do we know the correlation with aquifers? Are they dropping at the same rate or?
So basically, if you have a well, and how you can gauge if the aquifer is depleting is that you have your static water level and your pumping water level, right? And typically, if your static water level doesn't go down year after year, then your aquifer is not depleting. Quite often, there's issues with respect to incrustation of materials in a well that will result in the well not producing water. And quite often that's confused with the well, the actual aquifer depleting. But you need to identify, make sure that the well is working properly and there's no well incrustation and all of that stuff, and your static water level will always get back to the same value. If the drought situation is affecting your aquifer, then year after year after year, if that well, for example, or wells in that area have in the 70s, for example, been at a certain static water level, the static water level in that area is going down, that's an indication that the aquifer is depleting. So,
That's my question.
yeah.
That's my question is everybody's talking drought, so is it just surface drought or is it aquifer drought?
Yeah, no, you got it both. You're correct. There's typically a lag time for groundwater wells after we see the surface drop off in depletion. Okay. If there aren't any more questions, I'll thank you. And I am here for the rest of the day. If you have any questions, please come up and ask me.
Water wells and things like that. So we'll have him go now, and then we'll break for lunch after that, if that works for everybody. So I'll. Oh, yeah.
Are these other presentations available afterwards? On slide presentations?
How do you mean available after?
On YouTube or something.
Oh, yes, we are filming it. Yeah, we can definitely share the recorded presentation for anyone that's interested, for sure.
I've always wondered what it felt like to be a pinch hitter.
We're just gonna shoot back up.
Oh.
Almost good afternoon. I'm Marvin Jackson from Sundog Solar. Thanks for inviting me here. I realized as I drove up here this morning, this is the 24th year since but we started talking with Greywooded Forage and County of Clearwater. So a lot of people have changed back and forth. And that's what we've done for 24 years, is talk about solar water. So I listened and made some notes to Pervez's presentation. As I grew up, if somebody told you twice, this is about when I thought you should really start paying attention. So there's just some points here that he all talked on. Great presentation. My line of work, I do hear often, government regulations for a dugout is huge. Why do we have to do that? That's expensive. It's a true story he told you. Absolutely. Basically, you either need to be in or you need to be out. If you want a quality water system, what he laid out is how to get there. If you're just going to play around and dig a hole and hope water flows in it every year, you can do as you wish. So certainly his point of evaporation, hugely underestimated. On a hot, like 32-degree day with the wind blowing, we've recorded easy losses of 3 gallons per minute. So when it only rains once in a while, 3 gallons a minute adds up quickly. Certainly test holes, 1, 2, 3. If you have 2 sites, you're not sure, dig test holes. Yes, they cost money, but are you in or are you out? If you want a quality system, dig the test holes. Dugout size is correct. This winter alone, I think we've rebuilt 7 or 8 pumps where they ran dry. So dugout empty. Now, certain areas it's been 3, 4, 5 years without regular water, rainfall, but certainly calculate how much you need. And then we also add winter watering now. So we have solar systems where we're using that dugout, access to that dugout water 12 months of the year. That also increases how much water you need stored. Just a quick note on his intake. I hear this question all the time. Don't get all excited on a really tight, fine screen, because when it plugs off, somebody has to clean it out. But make sure that muskrats can't get in your pipe, because they do believe you built them the nicest little condo off to the side in that culvert. If anyone's using dams, usually the dam is used as a crossing for the livestock to get to one side to the other. Awesome idea. There's always a cow trail. If you get a big rain event and the dam overflows, that's what took out your dam, because there's no vegetation there to hold it. So despite how great of an idea that is, I'd largely refrain from trying to do that. The whole presentation today was about dugouts. Wherever you are from, dry land, wetland, out west where it usually rains, don't underestimate the fact of looking for the potential to drill a bored well. If you can get water, hands down, it's a better way than a dugout. Not against dugouts, but if you can bore a well, even though they cost more money, that's what you need to do. Emphasis on grass waterways coming into your dugout. Even if you farm or whatever, leave a little strip, leave that grass. That slows the water down, dumps the nutrients there. That's how a sandbar is built in a river or in a flood. As soon as the water slows down, it dumps everything in it. It's all prevention, easy to do, some thought and management ahead. Quick note on pond dye. Was also discussed a little bit. I think this is the coolest, cheapest preventative maintenance there is. It is basically concentrated food dye. Doesn't kill the fish. Anything that doesn't harm a fish is pretty safe. It dissipates itself, so there's no mixing. You just toss it out there. It will make your water look clean. Prevents the sunlight from hitting the algae, which is how it grows. So, very simple concept. About as safe as you can get, easy to use, not expensive. At the most, on a very hot, dry summer, you'd be 3 treatments per summer, usually only 2. So if you want to do some research into that, if you've ever wondered why the water at Banff looks so nice and blue, they also use it. I'm just joking, but it does look exactly the same. Okay, now to my actual presentation. So this is after 24 years of doing everything that we talked about so far this morning. In Western Canada, we are probably easily 10 years ahead of the United States on what we do with solar water pumping. Easily 10. You can ask a ton of Americans and they easily would agree with that also. So this is where I feel that we're at in the industry as I go through this today. So I really want to focus on you guys having a water management plan. Now we all have an estate plan, a recession plan, fertilizer plan, chemical plan. How come most of us don't have a water management plan? Now that doesn't mean that it needs fixed, completed, all in 1 year. You could have phase 1, 2, 7, 9. But if you don't have a plan, you're just spinning your wheels and probably spending money, excessive amount of money. Without water, you generally have nothing. So most of my discussion on the phone is a plan. How one project, the components of that project can be used somewhere else later, in winter, in summer, rented land, leased land. It's a water management plan. As I go through this, emphasis on return on investment. So all our stuff is very modular, totally to try to save you money and use the equipment 12 months of the year, because that's really when it's going to start making you money. I do agree, a water management plan becomes overwhelming. So most of my discussions, well, I need this, I ask questions, well, we could do this, this, and that, and you go in a big circle and you get right back to where you started. Now what do I do? So start drawing pictures. I really suck at pictures. Write down what you have, write down where you'd like the water, and then write down how that would change your life. As you go through that, you'll start to find common denominators. This is the one to put on the fridge. Do not create a make-work project. Well, who would do that? That's silly. Guaranteed I would. So you have to go back to this daily. Whatever you purchase from whoever you purchase and however you do it, the idea is to make your life easier and make you more money. Don't do a make-work project. Do you know how many people I talk to that go and start a generator to pump their wells every day? And they are so happy the first few weeks. Look what I saved. Well, then in year 2, we start to discuss how their marriage is going and maybe how they're not going on vacation. And the fact that fuel prices really suck. Do not make a work project. There's just a few fun facts to compare the industry between the United States and Canada. Probably surprising a bit. Average beef herd size in the US is 26 cows. In Canada it's 57. And what percentage of whole milk is water? 88%. And then just on the bottom, the cows are the ultimate measure of conservation in the province. Each cow represents at least 10 acres of grass. So one note on, back to the US, pretty current events. In Texas, there are 12 million head of beef cattle, and the Texas Panhandle has 85% of the herd. So that puts us in at about 10.6 million head, exactly where the forest grass fires are right now. I think in Canada, it's dropping every year for many, many years. I think we're 2.8 million in all of Canada. Remember, crazy numbers, don't matter how you look at it. So, a little bit on the solar water pumping, kind of split into 2 seasons. We are equally busy on the winter season as the summer season. Certainly positives and negatives to everything. Summer is like flat out, hands down, very easy to do. Winter, still easy to do, but we gotta talk a bit more about what's all happening. So you've heard this 100 times. It's been tested and researched many, many times. Positives in summer: clean udders, herd health, average daily gain. We actually conserve water when we don't have any. Feed efficiency. Negatives: cost. It's always there. There is some maintenance. On the new $120,000 truck you bought, there's still maintenance. There will be maintenance on our systems as well. Probably the biggest benefit of solar watering is winter. I would say, yeah, that could be 60% of our work right now. It just allows a lot less feed to be moved around. Maybe the cows can eat it where it is. They can also deposit the manure where it needs to be instead of in your corral. Remember, not a make-work project. We don't clean corrals, we don't treat calves as much. Everything's healthier, calving on clean ground. A negative is we need unfrozen water. You would not believe the amount of people that ask me to pump water and it's frozen solid. And it also works into more crop rotations. Certainly corn. If you took corn or corn grazing away from our industry, we'd be in serious trouble. An example of stockpiled forages. This is at Sundre. This is actually when it used to rain once in a while. Lots of things can be done with this. Okay, a question often overlooked in the industry, in the solar farm industry. These two solar panels are approximately 100 feet apart. That's the same amount of snow on each 100 foot. See how the one cleaned off and the other one didn't? Slight angle adjustment will do that. I don't want to get into solar farms because I get grumpy, but you can see the difference, right? Every hour the sun shines on there, if one is free and one isn't, that's energy that you either gained or you lost. Get asked about hailstorms. So this is the big hailstorm at like Kivasville through Antler Hill. That is by far the largest. If that hailstone hit you, you would be dead. Not often do we have solar panels break. I think this is the only storm that's happened. But that hailstorm actually, we had hail go right through tin roofs, so I would say it's an extreme. Get asked about things that float on the water. So this is actually a pipeline system. We're pumping out of there, pushing water back up the hill. The pump is submerged, so our intake's about 7 inches below surface. The duckweed doesn't, it just floats there. We pull the water from underneath it. Basically, floaters are at the top and sinkers are at the bottom, and our pump's in the middle. So, zero concern with that. Okay, I get asked a lot about what we can do. Basically, it's what we can't do anymore. So we would do lots of surface water, meaning dugouts, creeks, lakes, ponds, deep well systems. The deepest we've pumped so far is 430 feet. That's not the limit, that's just the deepest we've been asked to pump. Pipeline systems, as mentioned, more and more of them. Not for the faint of heart. I do need to do some calculations and engineering on what we're doing there. The farthest we've gone so far is 3 miles. So we're getting 10 gallons a minute, 3 miles away, and the system's designed to have 300 cow-calf pair on that 3 miles summers. So basically, if you have one good water source, it might be easier to move water than it is to look or pray for rain to fill another dugout. Normally we don't bury that line. Some people recommend it, we don't. This one we did bury. This is right by the US border. It's extremely dry land there. You actually can't tell if a cow was there last week or 5 years ago. It's very sandy. Reason we buried it is we were going to have extremely hot water because there's almost no vegetation there. So. But normally we're just on top of the ground. I consider burying it a make-work project. I'm not lazy, I just have 1,000 things to do and you gotta pick your poison. When it's on top of the ground, if there is a leak, it's extremely easy to find and fix. 2, there will be some water somehow left in there over winter. It will thaw out in that pipe 2 to 3 weeks faster than if it's buried. Our grazing season is very short. You might need the 2 or 3 weeks. So yeah, we use tough high density poly. Usually we'll run it along a fence. 2 things, you know where it is. And 3, there's usually some vegetation along the fence more than just out in the middle of the field. So that also helps shade it. Portable systems, we would be the original company to design them. And what we're doing with the portable system is we're just looking to have one system do more work. So that can be used in the summertime and then also in the wintertime when herds move to a different location. There's a bit more on that. So limitations. So I use 15 imperial gallons per cow-calf pair. That's just a number. Yes, they drink more than that some days. For my calculation, the days they drink more of that is a hot day, which is a perfect solar day, so that offsets it. If it's rainy and the grass is dry, they'll drink less than that, but we have less solar. So I'm just using 15 as a number. It does not fail if the rest of the information is correct. And we cut it almost in half for yearlings. One point is we only have 24 hours per day. So if you want to water 200 or 300 cows and we can only pump the well at 2 gallons a minute, and I need 26 hours, it won't work. Everyone says, well, we need more storage. I don't care how much storage, we still don't have enough hours in the day. So you have to go back, find another water source. I have many conversations where we do not have enough water in 24 hours. Okay, there's 2 kinds of solar systems. One would be solar direct. So that means there's no batteries, there's simply a pump, solar panels, and a switch. Extremely common in the United States. And then there are battery systems, much more common here. One is not better than the other. but the parameters around the site are different. In the United States, average herd size was 26, we just talked about that. Much easier to pump water for 26 cows than it is for 60 or 600. The negative of solar direct is we need 3 days of storage. So the storage of water replaces the energy in the batteries. So often here for a solar direct system, we would need 10,000 gallons of storage. 10,000 gallons of storage is not cheap, it's not portable, it may not even be easy to get to the site. In Canada, battery systems are more common. Some of that is a short season. 2, we would excessively use our systems more in the wintertime than the Americans. So one is not new, one is not better. It's all about your site. If you have an oil company that give you a 10,000 gallon tank for free, I'll talk solar direct. But usually, hands down, I can hammer it easy on a battery system. So that brings in the next question that I get often. These batteries are expensive. Shouldn't we use smaller ones? Or how long are they going to last? A properly designed battery system, it just accepts energy and delivers energy, never runs out, never overflows. It's just a spot to store it. If your system's designed right, you should be 8 years of use out of your batteries. I don't find that expensive. Easy to do. We just have to use the right numbers, accurate numbers. Not numbers at the kitchen table, but actual numbers. So I'd be the first one to say I don't want to sell you something until you go out and actually give me some elevations and some distances and give me the correct herd size. I don't work for Revenue Canada. I don't care how many cows you have, but I need to know so that we design the system properly. I'm creating the energy that's going to run your pump. I need to know how many gallons. A couple of examples here, back to solar direct on the right. Extremely simple system. You just got to have the storage. You're going to pump as much water, actually more per minute with a solar direct than you are a battery. So it's not like it's a limpy system. You just have to have the storage. System on the left. This is an old homestead well. Submersible pump down there. We fill that tank for winter. Largest winter watering system we've done so far. We watered 1,000 cows. We pumped 2.4 million gallons in one winter. That system's like 6-7 years old. That's a lot of water. Do the calculations on how much manure that is and figure out how much that would have cost you to take it out of your corral. Okay, integrated systems. We would be the only one that do this. So basically, we can take, in the industry, it's common for everyone's herd to be split 2 times, 3 times, different pastures, different herd bulls, and then in the fall, they all come back together, wean calves, put all the cows together. So instead of selling you 6 different systems to do that, either of these pictures, they have portable systems, go about surface water in summertime. And then when the herd comes back together, the portable systems come together and we plug them in. So we don't take anything apart, we just plug them in. And then it's running for the winter grazing. So picture on the right, customer has 7 units. He travels a circle about 100 kilometers around with cows in every direction all summer. A huge part of his winter feed is swath grazing, 1/4 section. So they're all 24-volt summer systems for dugouts, creeks. He has a deep bored well there for winter. So we bring them back, line them up, plug them in. We actually make a 48-volt system out of them to run a deep well pump that goes into that tank. So a little bit on our winter system. At some point this winter, we hit minus 40. One customer said we were minus 57. I had no negative calls that entire week. I had 6 different producers phone, and their systems worked flawlessly at minus 40, minus 57. I could tell you a little bit how that works. It's a little bit like the caramel secret. If I tell you, I have to kill you. But it does work. This is portable. We talked about it a bit. Yes, we design portable. We sell lots of them. I have people come to me and say, I need portable. And I would say, are you really sure? If you have one herd and you're moving it 2 different places, you're much better off to buy 2 stationary systems and just move cattle. Remember, don't make a make work project. But if you move 7 times, or I have one person at Bonnyville moves 82 times per summer, portable, quick, not a make work project, needs to happen. So the person that's moving it 82 times, he's moving 1,000 yearlings each time with that. He's custom grazing, being paid by the pound. I would challenge you to conservatively use any number you want, and he is making a crap load of money doing that. His system is now, I'd say 16, 17 years old. We've replaced batteries once. We've updated his pump once, which wasn't because it failed. We just have much better technology now. And that's all he's done to his system. Back to our pipelines. All our stuff can be mounted differently, so the equipment design is the same, but we may put it on a trailer, we may put it on a skid, we may just have it stationary on a post. This is a wet well off the very edge of, it's not a wetland. There is a creek quite a ways away from this, so instead of putting a pump in the creek, we have just put a wet well in, so the creek can flood, it can ice jam, logs can go down there, people can fish, and we were several hundred yards away from it, and we just pull water out of there for a pipeline. Oh yeah, so how high can we lift? Kind of went through that. 430 feet is what we've done. It's very hard to take a picture of a cliff. So the one on the right is from the bottom, looking up. I believe this is Battle River. And that's the kind of vegetation and trail down to where the pump is. Wind versus solar. Okay, so often asked question. When we first started out, we did do both. We still do, but you're gonna have to really convince me to put wind with it. I'm not against wind. Wind is moving parts, and honestly, everyone stands there and go, man, look at that, it's making me money. Look, round, round, round. It's all moving parts. They're wearing out as they go. Extremely high maintenance, extremely high cost of the maintenance. To go up on that tower safely, legally, not easy. And it's sheer physics. In the world, we need a wind generator that will produce power at low wind speeds, because that's commonly what we would get every day. And we also need it not to blow into 1,000 pieces at a high wind. extremely hard to do. The reason the big wind generators are so geared down is for that reason. Their life expectancy is probably months shorter than their payback. But even on a small scale, they're just not available. Yes, you can Google it and there'll be 1,000 companies want to sell you one. I've tried quite a few. I only have one I'll recommend. They just blow up, for sure. This picture on the left, obviously we done this. So we are watering 700 cows in the wintertime on top of a mountain. You can't see it, but it is on top of a mountain there. So we have 32 very large batteries in there. The kicker to the whole system is we can only pump 3 gallons a minute. So that system's running like 18 hours a day. That system is about 3 or 4 years old. Since then as well, it's actually dried right up. So he's sitting without water right now. System on the right is just by a traditional windmill. Windmill, you kind of need storage. You're kind of in the same as the solar direct situation. It doesn't blow every day. When it does, it's great. Where we would use it, where you could convince me to use it, is in a winter system. We have wind at night. We don't have much solar. I'm only using 3 hours per day on a winter calculation. So we have a hybrid system. That's the end. A couple things I forgot to say, I guess, over the 24 years we've been doing this. We do design, manufacture our own pumps. All our equipment would be our own design. The only thing we don't build is the solar panels, actually. That's all we do. We don't do houses. We have in the past. We chose to strictly do agriculture scenarios. That's kind of what I grew up with. Questions? Yes?
I've just got a question. Have you ever seen inflatable swimming pools used as temporary water storage in these kind of systems that we sell?
There would be. Actually, kind of in the oil field would be like that, but they are priced as in the oil field sector. Anything plastic like that has a UV rating, breaks down in the sun. You have beef cattle and other sharp teeth critters around. We would prefer to use steel. We have at the back pictures where we used a galvanized grain bin and put a liner inside. That worked extremely well. Some cost of assembling a grain bin on top of a mountain, but it happened. We have 10,000 gallons of storage there. And I'm certainly not against that. It's just a cost thing, for sure. So yeah, our batteries have 4 days of storage. So that means, say you have 100 cows. That's 1,500 gallons per day somehow they're going to drink. So we need 6,000 gallons of storage. Solar direct 3 days, so we'd be 4,500. In the batteries, if we design it with batteries. Batteries are full, we unplug the solar. We're going to water 100 cow-calf pair for 4 days before the system goes down from low battery. Now there's 100 ways to sell you on that if you don't know that. Any battery system works. We just didn't decide how many days it was going to work. So buyer beware. I can easily make the price of a system smaller by not giving you the batteries you need, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be happy and it's not going to work. It'll work most times. Most times don't work for us. We're either in or we're out. It needs to work every day. More questions?
So last year with the amount of smoke we had here, how good is it charged?
It's a good question. We've had several summers of smoke. From my experience, based on the 4-day rule, if we have 4 days and we have the same amount of cattle that we talked about when we sized the system, it made it through all the smoke. We didn't have any systems go down. I had 2 calls in last year's smoke, which was more smoke than the year before. And they both admitted to me that they had put more cows in there than we had first talked about. 2 calls is not much. I have over 6,000 systems somewheres. So the 4-day rule, I don't break it, not knowingly break it. It just works. Sometimes, yes, does that mean dollars and batteries? Absolutely. It's kind of like a tractor. A lawnmower is a tractor. 4-wheel drive, tripled up, dualed is a tractor. But they do totally different work. So which one do you need? More questions?
Yeah, 4-day system, 100 cows. What's it gonna cost me for a system to put that in?
Okay. A little bit depends on whether you want portable, the mount, all that. But you would be, no water trough, you would be around $2,000. All portable, you could be more, you could be 7, so 2 to 7. And I know that's a range, but there's different amounts of things you're going to get in that range. So. More questions? Pipeline, certainly one of our more expensive options. But what is water worth 3 miles away for 300 cow-calf pair? That's a lot of water pumped every day. And if you're having trouble finding water, it's the more secure way to go. We didn't talk about another advantage of pipelines that I'm seeing. So traditionally, in fairness, we didn't have the equipment to push water remotely like we do now. So we come upon the idea we should fence more. And we go open gates and we decide when they go in there and when they come out. There's a whole industry built on it. I didn't say it was wrong, but on large paddocks, by having more water distribution, we may not need any fences, or certainly way less. All a cow wants is good grass and water. They're only going to walk so far before they have to turn around and get water. So if we have better water distribution, the herd actually will move around pretty darn good, just by having more water distribution. It depends a little bit on the size of the paddock and whether you have tame pasture bush, because no different than us, they're going to want to eat differently, and you may need fences. But fences are a little bit overrated. For one, they're really costly now. 2, you have maintenance. Maybe we should look at just having more access to water. That's just things that I'm seeing. It's like 24 years of doing this, wandering around looking at grass. I see a lot of stuff.
Mark, I can't help but say something.
Yeah.
You're missing out on the whole comment about manure distribution. When the water's out there, if you take the water to the cattle, the manure is spread out. If the cattle come to the water, the manure all gets concentrated.
True, and I guess when I said that, I was referring to traditional, what I would call traditional, where the cows all come home, you feed them in your corral all winter, you haul feed back in, and then you take more money and you haul all the manure back out, and then you haul the cows back out there.
But even on a summer pasture system, you can get so much better distribution of the manure if you have the water out.
True.
scattered throughout.
True, which is back to just, so once we have water in a pipeline, it's under pressure, so it's like your house. Whatever tap you turn on, water comes up. It's other than the cost of adding troughs, or moving troughs for that matter, your cost is there. So it's not actually that much more money to have better distribution of water. And that's where phase 1, 2, or 3 comes in. Odd person has anteed up a ton of money. But don't think that you need to. We're back to the water management plan we started with. We need phase 1, 2, or 3. So as long as we have enough discussions on where you may be, are you exiting the industry or are you growing? Do you have children working with you or do you don't? We have all them conversations. So if we design it right, even though we may add a winter trough or a deep well pump, 90% of what we already own we're using. So to add the 10% 3 years from now is a manageable thing. That's where we want to be. And not every time is it perfect, but if we don't have that conversation, each time I talk to you, I'm going to want a whole whack more money, and that's wrong. I've had more than one customer come to me fully planning on spending $10,000 to $20,000, and one left with a $400 pressure system. That's all he needed, because we'd done our homework and had a water management plan. Everybody that I deal with, their herd grows, things change. And that's what we want to happen, but we just have to have discussions and plan forward. In fairness, I've had customers not buy anything from me because they insisted they needed one system, they need to pump from A to B. And I would say, like if you've got 200 or 300 cows, they don't go away in Arizona for the winter, they obviously go somewhere. We should discuss to see if we can save money somewhere else. I think it's lunchtime. I'll be around for the rest of the day, I'm not bailing on you. I take all questions. I'll just give you a positive and negative. You don't have to think I'm right. I'm just going to give you 24 years of kicking around. So.
Thank you very much, Marvin, and for sharing your years of knowledge and the different options out there, whether you're watering in the summer, winter, or both. So that was great. I think it's lunchtime. The ladies, I believe, should be ready for us. And just a reminder, there's the tables at the back with some resource information on the different different presenters have today on what they've discussed that you can take home with you. And yeah, we'll take a lunch break and reconvene at about 1:15, and then we'll head into the different grants and funding opportunities out there nowadays. So we'll see you after lunch.
So I'll just get started talking about RELP. So just quickly, I'll be talking about kind of the history, a quick program overview, eligibility criteria, specifics of each project that is eligible under the program, some application tips for when you're filling it out, and then contact information at the end if you want any help. So quick history, RELP comes from kind of a long history of agro-environmental programs starting in 2003. So you might be familiar with the Ag Policy Framework, Growing Forward 2, or CAP. And then now we are calling it SCAP. So that's a 5-year, $3.5 billion investment, with 60% of the funding coming from the federal government and 40% from the provinces or territories. And then RALP itself falls under that SCAP umbrella, and it's $508 million over the 5 years. So the main objective of RALP is to increase environmental resiliency of ag landscapes by accelerating the adoption of beneficial management practices to maximize ecological goods and services. And for RALP, their three main focuses are carbon sequestration, water quality, and biodiversity enhancement. So all the projects that I'm going to be talking about are going to focus on those three things. And then there is just a note for carbon sequestration is that they are doing calculations to account for carbon credits and greenhouse gas offsets. So under the program, you wouldn't be eligible to sell those carbon credits elsewhere for the 3-year term under RALP. So the first portion of eligibility is that you are either a primary producer with a minimum of $25,000 farm commodity produced annually, a group, either Grazing Reserve Association or Community Pastures, or an Indigenous farmer rancher. And then the second part of the eligibility is that you have an environmental farm plan, and with RALP, you can apply before your environmental farm plan is complete, but you do have to have it completed by the end of the 3-year term to submit. So under RALP, there are 4 main project types: pasture management, cropland conversion, tree establishment, and wetlands. And then I'll kind of go into detail of each of the subcategories. So under pasture management, the first BMP is riparian area management. So that's those areas around rivers, streams, lakes, and wetlands. And so each project kind of has a minimum requirement that you have to do, and then there are also other BMPs that you can implement that they'll fund on top of kind of the minimum requirement of what they want you to do. So for this one, you have to include at least one of the following: so fencing, off-site watering, a water course crossing, and technical support. You can apply for like all of those if you wanted to, but you have to apply for at least one. And with technical support, that is offered for all of the BMPs that I'm going to be talking about. So they'll fund $2,000 per BMP to either work with a PAG or a certified crop advisor. The second one under pasture management is rotational grazing. So for this one, you have to have at least cross fencing, but they'll also fund off-site watering, water course crossing, and again, that technical support. With the off-site watering system, that also includes things like the pipeline, like if you wanted a solar system, they kind of cover the power sources as well, so that's like the full entire system. And adding legumes to existing tame forage stands. So for this one, they'll cover the cost of the legume seed and also the seeding cost. And then on top of that, if you are applying inoculants, they can also cover those costs. And with this one, I guess for all the projects, try to budget for all 3 years. This one specifically, since you'll be seeding, if you're thinking that you might need to reseed, then make sure you budget for those 3 years of seeding. If you don't think, if it's like a drought year coming up and you might need to reseed, try to budget for that additional seed. So the second section is cropland. So cropland conversion, this one is to convert it to native or tame forages. And for this, you would have to apply for your forage seed and your seeding costs. And if you're planning on grazing the area, they'll also cover perimeter fencing or off-site watering systems. If there's going to be legumes in the mix, they will cover inoculant, and then they also cover egg lime or equivalent, or soil testing. And if you are planning on doing egg lime, they require that you also have soil testing done. Okay, strips, grass, waterways. So this one's similar to seeding the forage, but you're focusing on kind of those marginal areas where it might be high salinity or there's waterway. So again, they'll cover the cost of native or tame forage seed and your seeding cost, as well as any inoculant, egg lime, or soil testing. Intercropping, so this one they require that you have at least 2 annual crops, and one has to be a pulse. For this one, they're only covering the cost of the pulse seed, as well as your seeding cost. This one doesn't have to be done on the same field, just so that you can keep your crop rotation, but they do recommend that it be roughly the same acreage size from year to year. And you can also apply for inoculant, and if you're going to be grazing this area that you're going to be intercropping, you can also apply for perimeter fencing and offsite watering system funding. And then this one, again, budget for the 3 years, since you will be seeding, since it's annual crop, so you'll be seeding every year, so make sure you include your seed price for those 3 years. The cover crop cocktail, so this one requires 3 or more annual crops. And again, they just cover the cost of the pulse seed and seeding cost, and also inoculant, perimeter fencing, and offsite watering if you're going to be grazing. And again, make sure that you're applying for the seed for those 3 years. Okay, this third section is for tree establishment. So this one is for new shelter belts or widening shelter belts. It wouldn't be, you have to kind of be increasing, it can't be on an existing shelter belt, but they will cover the cost of tree or shrub seedlings, as well as mulch, irrigation system components, which could be important if it's a drought year, you want them to establish well and make sure you're watering them, soil and water testing, and first year fencing to exclude any livestock from that area while the trees are establishing. And pollinator strips is kind of similar, but they're including, with the trees and shrubs, they're also including grass and wildflower seed. So they'll cover the cost of that seed, as well as, again, the mulch, irrigation system, soil and water testing. And then the last category is the wetland restoration and construction. So this one's a little bit different in the way that they calculate cost, and it also has a separate application form when you go on their website. So the way they calculate it is just a flat rate of $1,000 per acre. And you have to participate in the Alberta Environment Protected Areas Wetland Replacement Program. This one's not applicable on Crown land, but you can apply on municipal land, versus the other projects you can do on public land. You just have to work with a rangeland agrologist. Yeah, so there are some nuances with the program, so make sure that you're reviewing the funding list. That's on the RALP website, to just make sure that what you're applying for is actually eligible under the program. A couple points to note that people have often gotten confused with is that new water development, so if you're drilling a new well or if you are digging a dugout, those aren't eligible under RALP. They will be covered under the water program. RALP deals with existing water sources, and then if you wanted to add a watering system, then they would cover the cost of that watering system. And then the second point is that soil testing is required if you're requesting funding for ag lime. So how much money can you get? They kind of have 3 separate segments of how they calculate your cost. So the first portion is your implementation cost. So that would be what you are actually spending to implement this project. They do have some cost maximums, which I'll go over in the next slide. But yeah, basically you just put in kind of what your cost is, and they do require invoices, except for seed and fencing can count as material on hand. So for seed, you would just estimate, if you do have it on hand and you don't have an invoice for it, for seed you would just estimate it at the market rate. And then for fencing, there's a cost maximum associated with it. So if you have fencing materials, then you would just put in that cost maximum, and that kind of covers the cost of the materials as well as your labor. And then the third one that they would count as material on hand is for trees and shrubs, and they do require an invoice for it, but it can be 6 months before the February 1st date, and that's just to kind of help you with nursery order dates, so you can order them ahead of time and have them ready to be planted kind of starting February 1st, which is when the program opened this year. The second portion of how they're calculating cost is your opportunity cost. So that's just the profit that you would forego by implementing a practice. The opportunity cost is only available under certain BMPs. So on the funding list, it'll state what it is. An example is the funding. They'll offer you $200 per acre as a one-time payment if you're converting crop to native forage, just because it's harder to establish than a tame forage. And then the last section is an impact adjustment. So on your application, there'll be a checkbox. If you want to apply for the impact adjustment, you can get an additional 5 to 15%. They'll just evaluate your project and determine the potential impact of what you're going to be doing. They can offer you additional funding from that. So some of the cost maximums these are all the cost maximums. So when you're applying for any of these, it's good to note because it kind of simplifies your application and you can just input these. So for technical support, they'll offer $2,000 per BMP. For fencing, if it's barred or page wire, they'll cover $10 per meter or $5 per meter for electric, and that includes your materials and installation cost. For trees and shrubs, they cover $5 per tree, and that includes the seedling and your labor cost. Seeding operations are $30 per acre. Soil testing, they cover $200 per quarter. Egg lime is $200 per acre, and for the pollinator strips is $60 an acre, and that's for your seed cost and labor. Okay, so stacking funding. Pretty well you won't be able to stack funding with anything. It's a government program, so you can't stack it with any other government-funded programs. And then because they're claiming the carbon credits, you can't apply for any other program that would also be claiming carbon credits. The only exception is, like I mentioned, that wetland program, which you would have to apply. So if you apply for the wetland program through RALP, you would also apply for the wetland replacement program with Alberta Environment. Okay. So for funding that you can receive, there is a minimum and a maximum. So your project has to be large enough that you're receiving at least $2,000. If you're a primary producer, you can get up to $150,000. And if you are an Indigenous applicant or a group, you can get up to $300,000. And that maximum is for the full 3-year term. So if you apply this year for $100,000 of funding, then next year you could apply for $50,000. When to apply, most projects, so that's the pasture management, crop, and tree planting projects, you can apply now. It opened February 1st, and it will close on November 30th for applications. That November 30th date is also the date that you have to have your projects completed by. And the dates are the same if you're planning on applying next year, February 1st to November 30th. The wetlands are a little bit different. It does still open February 1st, but they're kind of continually accepting applications. The close date is January 31st, and that's just because a lot of the work for the wetlands is taking place in the winter, so they just want to give you that extra time to get your wetland work done. Important dates, so November 30th, like I said, is the last date that you can get your projects completed, and then you have to maintain the project for 2 years. So if you apply this year, 2024, you would maintain that project until November 30th, 2026. And it's important to apply early if you want funding prior to implementing BMP activities. So if you're applying November 30th, the last date that they'll accept applications, that's also the day your project has to be completed, so it doesn't really give them any time to say that you're approved or not. So the earlier you can apply, the better. So timeline, basically what happens, you would submit your application. Once you're approved, you get 50% of the funding, and then you will complete your project on November 30th of the year that you apply. You'll maintain the project for the 3-year term, and then at the end of the term, you'll do some final reporting. You'll submit your EFP certificate if you haven't already, any of your final invoices that you still need to get in, and then they would give you the remaining 50% of the funding. So just some tips for your application when you're filling it out. Multiple BMPs can be applied for on the same application. So if you're wanting to do a tree planting and rotational grazing, you can fill that out on the same application. The only exception is if you're doing a wetland project, which has its own application form. Multiple BMPs can be done on the same land, and there is a box that'll just ask you kind of what the quarter sections are, and you can just fill that in again on the same application. Review the funding list to ensure expenses are eligible for BMPs and if a cost maximum is applicable. So if it is applicable, it's kind of easiest just to put that cost maximum in. And make sure you plan your budget to cover expenses for the full 3-year term. Your best bet, if you're not sure kind of what seed prices are going to be in 3 years, is to estimate high, and then at the end of the 3-year term, once they get all your invoices and receipts in, they can kind of lower that funding to what you actually did pay. But if you estimate low, then they won't have budget to give you that funding. So yeah, try to estimate high as best as you can. And projects on public land need to be approved from a provincial rangeland agrologist. All activities must be implemented by November 30th of the intake year and maintained for years 2 and 3. Each BMP has to have an implementation date, and they'll ask you that on your application, kind of when you think you're going to have the project completed by, but it does have to be completed by, for sure, November 30th. Your applicant name must match the name on your submitted invoices and receipts, so that's really important. They won't be able to give you funding if you put like your personal name on the application, but then all your invoices are in your company name as an example, so make sure that those are going to line up. Include quotes, invoices with your application. This will just help streamline that process. Applications must have a handwritten signature, so they aren't accepting e-signatures, so you will have to print it off, sign it, and then scan it back in and send it off to them. And receipts must be incurred within the dates of the program term. So that's February 1st to November 30th, so anything that you're purchasing has to have a receipt date between February 1st and November 30th. The only exceptions for that are the seed and fence, which can count as material on hand. Applications are reviewed as they're received and evaluated according to the eligibility criteria and funding availability. So it's a good idea to apply early. Incomplete applications will be returned. They'll probably just ask for clarification, and then you can just resubmit with your corrections back to them. Funding's not guaranteed until the application has been approved. Wetland category has a separate application form and intake cycle, and that's it for the tips. And then verification, so they will just randomly select projects to verify. It can be like you might not get verified at all, or you might get verified every year, just depending on how it goes. We are recommending that you do take pictures of your project. An example could be if you apply for cross fencing under the rotational grazing BMP, and then the verifier comes in the fall and maybe your fence isn't up anymore, then at least if you have pictures, you can show them that you did implement that project. And then this is just the last slide, so if you do want help with your application, we have the 1-866-310-RELP number that you can call, or you can also email info@relp.ca. And then this is the official website, which is very long, but if you type in relp.ca, it will direct you there, and you can find the funding application, or the funding sheet for the details of what's eligible, and your application form, and yeah, any other information there. Are there any questions? I'll just go back here if you want to write that down.
Yeah, I got one question. So I applied for that, I put in, you see, they took off annual crops and we put in alfalfa.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that because of the cold weather, it was warm, and then it got really cold. It says a lot of alfalfa fields will be killed. What happens if I lose my entire alfalfa field for winter kill?
So they would want you to reseed it.
Okay, but you can't reseed alfalfa after alfalfa. It won't grow because of the autoimmunity.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about that if you can't reseed it.
And in fact, they say you can't reseed it for 3 years, otherwise nothing will grow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how they would handle that. They might then not fund it. And with...
Okay, we've already been approved, that's what,
Oh, okay.
what I'm saying. So we got 50% up front.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is, what happens if that happens?
They might not, like, I guess if they verify it and it's not there, then they might not give you the remaining funding.
Okay, so we couldn't reseed that to some, because you can't reseed alfalfa after alfalfa, then what do? Put it back into field crops? Then for sure that wouldn't work.
Yeah, that's kind of a hard one. I can double check that for you with someone else and then get back and see kind of how they would handle that, if you want.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, sure, yeah, I'll get your information kind of after this. Yep.
Are you quite familiar with the EFPs, the environmental farm plans?
Yeah, a little bit.
So I'm just wondering, like, we just bought a company, a farm company, that had it, does it transfer to the new owner?
No. You'd have to refill it out kind of under your information and like how you're managing
It's like
it.
a family farm that is, I bought it from my dad, so I was wondering if his farm bought it from the company, does he get it through the company?
I don't think it would. Yeah, you probably should go back and look at it and see, because if the management is different, then there might be some questions that aren't the same. I know if it is, because they'll ask you to put the company name and then they'll also ask for individuals' names. That could also be on it. So I guess like if your name's under it, then it could still be applicable.
What, yeah, it's a father, son, and then he's retired, and I bought the company. Okay, I'll pick up.
Awesome, thank you very much, Jenna. Alrighty, so now we will go on to off-CAF funding, and Karen Yakamishin with ARDAR will touch on the newly open program off-CAF, which just opened up here a week or so ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Oh, you're through here.
Hi, everybody. Okay, yeah, so as Benita has mentioned, or Bettina, this is the third year. We just opened on Friday. There has been some changes, so maybe just, has anybody been involved with this program or applied for it in the last 2 years? Or are you all new to it? Okay, that's good to know. I will start from scratch. So on-farm climate action fund, it is delivered by, here. It's delivered by ARDAR. So ARDAR's mandate, ARDAR stands for Results-Driven Ag Research, and really its mandate is about linking producer-led research and extension, or for example, this program to actually what's happening on the land and what needs to be done through research in that. So that's kind of who ARDAR is. The On-Farm Climate Action Fund, also known as OFCAF, it is to help support producers in adopting BMPs. The goal is, and this is important to remember, is about reducing greenhouse gases, increasing sustainability, efficiency, and resilience. So as you see, some of the projects that we fund are focused on greenhouse gases and not necessarily water quality or some other focuses. So we have 3 categories that we fund: nitrogen management, cover crops, and rotational grazing. Just some quick facts. Yep. This program will go, it's been extended for a year, so it goes till the end of next March. We also support the adoption, or field days and workshops and training, so we have some of that stuff that goes on during the year with some other partners. It's delivered on a case-by-case basis, and it's bound by the program's budget, so when we run out of money, the program's done. Applications are reviewed, and BMPs and eligible expenses may close as we reach targeted outcomes. So perhaps rotational grazing, we've set a dollar value in terms of what we'll fund in that way. As soon as we reach that dollar value, those rotational grazing projects will be closed. There are a couple other organizations in Alberta that deliver off-CAF. They have their own requirements and rules, kind of similar between, and you'll also see this between what I tell you and what you heard about the RELP program. There's some different things. So you have to kind of pick the program that fits for you. So CFGA, Canadian Forage and Grazing Association, or EcoCert are 2 other organizations in Alberta that deliver a similar program. And like was said earlier, there is no double dipping with other programs. So once again, you're eligible to receive funding if you can demonstrate a minimum of $25,000 of gross farm income. You will work with a PAG or a CCA to develop that plan, and their name will go on your action plan. And that's part of your application, is that recommended plan. And you will also provide, in order to qualify, you need to provide permission for post-project inspections. So we do come out on some operations and just see how you spent the dollars and where your projects are at. So we have, over the 3 years, we have a maximum grant amount of $75,000. So before we had 2 years, now with the 3rd year, it's still that $75,000 max per producer. You are eligible for 85% reimbursement all of your costs for the project in those eligible cost areas. You must pay 100% of the costs upfront, and we do not have in-kind reimbursement like Ralph does for your fencing or for existing seed. So we have to see invoice for new product for that. You are required to submit invoices and, most importantly, proof of payment that says you've paid on the invoice. And that what we're finding now with the 2 years, that seems to be a stall for us, because we've got had to go back to a lot of producers to say, I need proof of payment. And proof of payment is an invoice with a 0 amount on it, or a canceled check, or a bank statement, so we know it was paid. Minimum projects are for $2,500 up to a maximum of $75,000, and those payments are considered taxable income, so you will get a tax receipt for that. So our application process, if you go on the website, if you need to go on the website and pull off an action plan template for whatever project you're applying for, and you will complete that first before you go back to the website. We have the Argo site, which is our database, so all of your information will be entered in there, and you will upload those action plans. So this is where if you've got a PA helping you or a CCA, they can help you with some of that technology if you're struggling with it. From there, you will receive approval on your proposed project and your budget. And then once your project is completed, that's when you submit your invoices and your proof of payment for all of those eligible VMPs that were on your original project. We review those invoices, and then you receive your funding at that point. So that's a bit of the kind of highlight of the process. What you need to know. So new for 2024. You guys aren't tainted by the last 2 years, but for each one of our project areas, you will have to do an individual application. So it's either going to be a nitrogen management project, a rotational grazing, or a cover crop project. You can apply in all those 3 project areas, but they are separate applications. Within the application, you will attest that you meet the program requirements, and if you are on rented land, that you have landowner permission to proceed with the project. Once again, the disclaimer about greenhouse gas emissions and any offset programming, that if it's a mandatory program, you cannot use these as carbon offsets on that particular project between our project dates. You must document. So another thing too, we talked earlier about taking pictures. Take a picture before you do the project, and a picture after you do the project, and you submit that with your invoice and your proof of payments. Once again, provide permission for post-project inspections. And also remember, you have to receive in writing permission from ARDAR or your approval from ARDAR before you can implement the project. That's a really important piece. So don't go out and start buying stuff as soon as you've submitted your project. Make sure that you've got written approval. And then once again, the proof of payment. So that's kind of a bit of an overview of the program. So once again, I said for 2024, we have separate project areas that you will apply for separately. Some other changes, soil mapping and soil testing have a combined maximum of $25,000 for 2024. This other one here is a little bit complicated. If you only do soil testing or mapping and no other BMP, either this year or in the last 2 years, then you are going to have to provide some additional information on the impact that made on your nitrogen use. And we'll talk a bit more about that further on. Another new cap we have is for the amendments. So if you're putting manure, compost, or digestate on land that hasn't received it in the last 10 years, we cover up to $75 per acre. We now have a max on that of $30,000 for 2024. So you can't use your whole $75,000 for the 3 years on the manure. And we also have a maximum distance of 30 kilometers from where your source to your field. And lastly, we do have a cap on the seed costs, and we have a maximum of $85 per acre on seed costs. So important dates. We opened on Friday. We will close when we hit the funding. We maxed out on our funding. And all your invoices and proof of payments have to be submitted by January 31st, 2025. And once again, approval must be given by ARDAR in writing before you implement your project. So, a bit more about how you go about applying. On the website, we have a BMP action template for each one of these project areas. You will complete that action template. You will provide us with the name of your PAG or your CCA on there. And then that will be submitted. Now, the cost of your PAG, we also have a $2,000 max for your PAG, or 10% of your project total cost. And that is over the 3 years. So I guess since you guys haven't been involved, this is probably not really important for you. But we've had PAGs max out that 2,000. So if they do go into year three, they won't receive any funding. And that template, it has all the background, your eligible cost. It's got selected resources for that particular project. And this is also where you would provide an attachment with aerial imaging of your project. And once again, if it's on leased land, you need to get landowner's permission. How to find a PAG. So there is a site that is documented on our website, which will link you to the guide for PAGs or CCAs in Alberta. We will not be making any specifications on who you use. It's totally up to you, and that's who you decide to work with. Okay, so a bit more detail on the projects. Cover crop, eligible activities. Once again, seed costs up to $85 per acre for regionally or commodity appropriate seed as recommended by PAG or CCA. So whatever that cover crop is, it has to be something that works for your area. Planting costs, we pay custom rates or equipment rental, but we will not pay in-kind costs for seeding. Once again, costs related to that BMP, developing that action plan if your PAG or CCA helps you with that. The goal with the cover crop is to have a living root going into freeze up. Cover crops underseeded with the main crop or seeded following harvest with enough time for adequate growth to winter. So this adequate growth, last year we set everything had to be seeded by September 15th, just based on weather conditions, and we want to make sure that there was a good catch. So we do ask when you're doing that. And that BMP, all the BMPs must be new to the field or new to the farm. This has got to be something new that you're trying. So that goes for everything. And ineligible, so silage crops, dead standing stubble are not cover crops. Annual regrowth is not a cover crop. If you're swath grazing, it is not a cover crop unless you have a brassica, turnip, or other root crop that will have a living root once it's swathed and you leave 6 inches over winter. So if you're grazing into the winter, it doesn't always fit here. Mechanical cost, chemical or cost for chemical or mechanical termination of that cover crop we will not cover. And corn grown for silage purposes, silage crops without live roots or stubble regrowth. We don't cover. Fertilizer crop protection costs are not eligible. And crops that will be harvested or grazed, leaving less than 6 inches of growth over winter. So, any questions on these? So typically this would be, it's kind of 3 different, there's some crops that are interseeded with your annual crop. We see in southern Alberta this being used a lot when they're taking off like beans or potatoes. They'll put in a crop to hold the soil over winter. And that's an example of some of those. When you go on the website, you will see this screenshot. It has each one of the templates. And here we've highlighted the cover crop template. So I suggest if you're interested, definitely go to the website. There's a lot of information on there, and there's this presentation is also on here if you want to see it again. Nitrogen management, so eligible activities. Cost of soil testing. So if you're soil testing but you've tested before, but in order to qualify, you have to be either increasing your intensity of sampling or your depth. And we have a minimum depth of 12 inches there. And the soil mapping must be new to the field and must include soil sampling per each of those zones. So for 2024, we have a combined maximum of $25,000 to do soil testing and mapping. And so here's kind of the details that if you're just looking at soil testing and mapping, you will also be required to provide historical rate information on your nitrogen fertilizer that you've used in that field before, and show how that new application rate changed your new application rate changed due to the mapping and soil testing. And then also the number of acres. So that's just if that is the only BMP. So that's kind of a clue there. Do something else now. So seeding and planting costs for your perennial legume crop, similar to the route program. Perennial legumes must be at least 50% legume and the maximum up to $85 per acre. Cost for synthetic nitrogen fertilizer replacements, or this is where we're looking at manure, compost, or digestate. Once again, $75 per acre on land that has not received manure in the last 10 years, and with a maximum of $20,000 or $30,000 for 2024. Also, we will cover the cost of either custom application or rental, equipment rental on that manure spreading. If you've been broadcasting in the past and you want to try banding, side dressing, or injection, we will cover the cost of either having that done custom applied or rental equipment. And then a couple other ones for the nitrogen management here, price difference between standard nitrogen fertilizer, and if you use a nitrogen fertilizer with a dual inhibitor, we will pay that price difference, and we will only pay on dual inhibitors, not single inhibitors, so that's something to keep in mind. And ESN, we will pay up to a maximum of $4,800 per farm. And right now the cost difference is at 0.16 cents, or 16 cents per pound. We adjust that depending on the time of year and that, because that does vary. So you cannot use a dual inhibitor and ESN in the same field. I suspect a lot of you guys probably aren't big on the cropping, so this may not apply too much, but if you're interested, it's there. Ineligible activities, we don't pay for the manure, we don't pay for the compost. The one thing with this project is you're spread and you have to incorporate. If you don't incorporate, that means you're not managing greenhouse gases. So on tame or native grasslands, putting solid manure is not eligible because you can't incorporate it. You can inject a liquid and that will qualify under this program. And then biological products like inoculants and various other things that the guys are putting on. And there are 3 different templates for the nitrogen management project, so just make sure you pick the right one. And now, rotational grazing. This is probably the one you guys are most interested in. Once again, we cover that support for doing the action plan or any assessments you need to do. We cover grazing materials, so cross fencing, wildlife friendly fencing, temporary fences, fencing, energizers, shallow buried water pipelines, and I'll talk about that a bit more, wet wells, waterers, and remote watering systems that are powered by renewable energy, so not a gas generator. So with the fencing, we do not cover perimeter fencing. It has to be internal cross fencing. Pipelines, and I know Martin talked about this earlier about leaving them on the ground. Our program does require them to be shallow buried, not deep buried. The reason we don't go with the on the ground is strictly for that herd health and the hot water, heating the water for that in that pipeline. And we don't go deep because that starts to introduce the potential of developing that further for our corral system and that. So that's kind of the limitations we put on that. We also do improve pasture composition, and once again, 50% legumes. We pay for the seed, custom seeding or equipment rates. Our seed costs $85 an acre. So, ineligible. We will not pay for an application that comes in with just water on it. It's not a water program. We need to see an improved grazing management in there. So this is really important that you incorporate either fencing or cropping in with that waterer support or waterer request. Also, to be aware, if you were approved for a waterer and some fencing and you only submitted for the water, we're not going to pay out on it. We have to see that you tried to do the whole project and that. So I know this year we've had guys do that. If they've purchased fencing equipment but weren't able to get it in, it's still okay, but we, just to be really clear, we are not a water program. And perimeter fences, I talked about. Removal of old fences, brushing, clearing fence lines, we don't cover that. And we don't cover the smart colors for virtual fencing at this time. I think these are all Texas gates, panels, existing fencing material, developing water supplies or water sources such as dugouts, wells, and springs. We've heard that before. Watering systems in corrals, deep buried water lines, trailers for hauling. If that trailer can be used for something else, it's not going to be eligible. And pasture modifications that are less than 50% legumes. So, any questions on that list? Yes?
Is this all of Alberta?
Yeah. The other thing that all of these should also have is maps. So for the first two projects, for your nitrogen management and your cover cropping, if you can provide an aerial photo that shows not the ownership line, but the field perimeter with the actual acres on, that's what we're asking for. Rotational grazing is a little bit more complicated. We are looking for your existing fences, your proposed new fences, where your water is, and where you're trying to distribute it to. And that. So these are really important when we look at those applications so we can see what you're currently doing and what you're proposing to change. Just a bit on knowledge and tech transfer. We do cover the province. We work with partners to support them in any knowledge and tech transfer events and that. So things like workshops, field days, peer-to-peer in all of those project areas. And so if you go to the website, you can sign up for the newsletter. In the newsletter, it will tell you about when the program opens, any important information, or any events that we have going on. And final reminders. So there is a program guide on the website. It has all the details on what our rates are for everything, and what's eligible and not eligible. Please remember when you're doing your application to include your PA costs in your total, because those have been missed quite a bit, so we've had to go back and make some adjustments. Your aerial photos, use whatever works for you. Guys that are tech savvy, go on Google Earth and can make a lovely map. If you just get a piece of paper and you have to draw it out on there, that's fine, as long as it is an aerial photo of the legal that you're working with. And then, of course, once you've completed your project, you go back into Argo, you submit your photos, your invoices, your proof of payment, and then we will review it and pay out. So we'll pay out as we are receiving them. So this is just some contact information. Off-CAF BMP, if you email us there with any questions, somebody should get back to you within a day. We try. Phone number, website, it's all there, so, and that. Any other questions? Okay, I'll just show you, this is an example of what the template is. It's one page, every one is one page. That's all it is that you have to complete, and that, and then provide us with your map, so. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Bettina. So I'm going to talk about the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program, SCAP for short, and particularly the water program, and what funding is available under this program. Essentially, this is a program funded similarly to the RALP program, in the sense that it's a federal provincial partnership program, and it's 60% funding is from the federal government and 40% from the Alberta government. There's two streams to the program. There's the on-farm irrigation stream and the on-farm water supply stream. I'm going to go through the on-farm irrigation stream just for your information, but if you have any questions on it, you'll have to call 310 Farm. And I've got the details then on the on-farm water supply stream. So the purpose is to encourage irrigation producers in the irrigation stream to replace, upgrade older equipment to new efficient systems and equipment through financial incentives. Improved efficiency of water use and energy use. So the eligibility, just like you heard before with the RALP program, you need to be an agricultural producer with at least $25,000 worth of farm commodities annually. And you own an irrigated agricultural operation in Alberta. And it's also eligible to Indigenous applicants. Eligible equipment is new low-pressure center pivot or drip irrigation systems, retrofits of a high-pressure to a low-pressure pivot, upgrades to existing low-pressure pivot, sprinklers, nozzles, pumps, variable frequency drives, variable rate irrigation equipment, control panels, etc. That's the eligible equipment you can claim for under this program. Cost shares. 25% of eligible costs, up to a per parcel maximum of $15,000 for new low pressure pivot or subsurface drip system, or $5,000 for equipment upgrades and retrofit. Annual maximums per applicant is $30,000. A parcel size needs to be greater than 20 acres for $15,000 claim, or greater than 10 acres for $5,000 claim. Need a complete application form, invoices, and proof of a minimum 10% down payment. Ineligible equipment under this program is irrigation expansion, used equipment, repair and maintenance of existing equipment, or any purchases made prior to April the 1st, 2023. So in a nutshell, that's the on-farm irrigation stream. Any questions? Feel free to call 310 Farm. And I'll go on to the on-farm water supply stream, which is my area. Purpose of this: supports better management of risks to water quality and supplies, and adaptation to climate variability, supports agricultural producers in securing, protecting, and managing sustainable constructed water sources. Again, eligibility is the same. Agricultural producer with at least $25,000 worth of farm commodities annually, and is liable to pay Alberta income tax or corporate tax on income from the production of farm commodities, as well as indigenous applicants. Just a note here as well that this eligibility also includes farmers who are renting the farmland. It's a farmer who's renting the farmland is considered a producer and is eligible to apply.
Okay.
You don't have to be the owner.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm exactly in this problem. I'm renting my land to a producer. Can I use their 25,000 worth of income?
Yeah, so if you are just receiving rental income
Yes.
from renting the land, you're not eligible.
Yeah, but I'm planning to start doing this for myself, but I cannot do it without water. Because right now we're using the water only during the summer. During winter I have no water. How I can put cows there with no water?
Yeah, so if you're going to be the agricultural producer, your owner and agricultural producer, and you produce $25,000 worth of farm commodities annually, you will be eligible. But in order to be eligible, what you're saying, it's a chicken and an egg thing, is that you've got to produce, you've got to have water in order to produce the $25,000 farm commodity, so that once you produce the $25,000 farm commodity, then you can be eligible. I understand where you're coming from, exactly. I'll get your information and I'll ask this question to people who run the program, and at least I'll be able to inform you. Okay, so, and of course indigenous applicants are also eligible. Standard incentive activities, new or expanded constructed water source developments. And that includes wells, dugouts, spring developments, dams, tie-ins to multi-user water supply pipelines, permanent cisterns, and unshared pipelines. They're all eligible for this incentive. Additionally, off-source watering systems on a new eligible water source development. So if you have a new well or a new dugout, and it has an off-source watering system, and we've gone through off-source watering, there's many types of off-source watering systems, that's also eligible for grant funding. How much grant funding is available? It's 25% grant and 75% is the applicant. For each new water source development, you'd get up to a maximum of $7,500. So that $7,500 would constitute maximum of 25% of the project cost. And for the program term goes from April 1, 2023 to March 31st, 2028. Under this program term, because why they've set that program term is they've put in so many dollars into the program, and the term runs from one date to the other date. In the program term, maximum you can claim is 2 projects, each worth a maximum of $7,500 or a maximum of $15,000 over this program term. Another special incentive is for well decommissioning. And this is a very, very good one, because wells that are left abandoned can be sources of huge amounts of pollution to the aquifers, and we want to stop that. So there's a special incentive for well decommissioning. If you decommission 1 well, you get 50% of the cost. 2 wells, 60%, 75% for 3 or more wells of the cost. And for each one, it's typically a $2,000 maximum. And as you can see here, they're pouring bentonite down the well, and then they're going to add water. And this seals the well and prevents contamination of the aquifer. That's very, very important. So this is something that you can apply for if you've got old abandoned wells in your property. Also for well pit conversions. In the olden days, they used to have well pits, but now, of course, the well pits have been known to introduce noxious gases in the pit itself, and is a huge safety hazard. So well pits are no longer allowed, but you can convert your well pit to an operating well, and those are also eligible for this funding. Additionally, we talked about wetland assessments before. What is a wetland? Is this parcel of, is this water body a wetland or not? Well, that's eligible for funding. So if you want to find out if you have a body of water, is it or isn't it a wetland? Well, you can apply for 50% funding up to $2,000 for the wetland assessment. And that'll help you delineate whether it's a wetland or not, or whether you can use that water or not. Yeah.
Will you do business adapter? Is that eligible?
Well, pitless adapter is part of the well. But when you do a well pit conversion, yes. It is eligible indeed. Because what you want to do, a well pit conversion, you're going to go to a pitless adapter, go 8.5 feet below the ground, get a pipe, and then go to a tank. You're away from that well pit. And that's eligible. Yes, absolutely. So applications, with regards to, I'll go through the second one first, is that applicants must contact agriculture and irrigation water specialists before starting the following projects to make sure it meets the legislative, Alberta Environment and Protected Areas requirements and program requirements. Is dugouts, spring developments, and dams. So you've got to contact a water specialist before you're thinking of doing any of these in order to get their acceptance of your design. Then you can proceed. Once you get their acceptance of your design, you need to provide a Google Earth photo of the location. You've got to provide the dimensions, and you fill out a construction sheet with the dimensions and so on, and you get a water specialist acceptance of it. Then you can proceed on and then apply for that after you build it. So for these projects, you have to contact a specialist before you apply. For the rest of them, submit the application once the project is completed and all expenses have been incurred and paid. Projects must meet regulatory requirements. So if we're talking about Water Act requirements that Angela delineated for you, they have to meet those regulatory requirements and the program terms and conditions. And I can send you the program terms and conditions and information about the SCAP program in more detail. Just call me at 310 Farm. Applications are considered on a case-by-case basis, assessed against program eligibility criteria, and are subject to program funding constraints. What that means is that the program fund only has a certain amount of dollars in it. It's a first come, first served basis. Right now we have money in it. So, but if towards the end in 2028, if it runs out, then we would let you know at that time. And here's contact information. The on-farm irrigation stream is at irrigation efficiency at gov.ab.ca or 403-381-5532. Or on-farm water supply stream, farm water supply at gov.ab.ca, and your handy number, just 7 digits, 310 farm. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Go ahead.
I think that's a question on the license.
Yeah.
Everything has to be licensed. Why is it?
Okay, so I'm just going to put in my input. Angela can also add to it. So basically, with regards to water wells, right? You have water wells. If it's less than or equal to 1,250 cubic meters per year for household use, or for household use plus garden watering plus animal watering. As long as the household use is in there, you can use 1,250 cubic meters per year for a water well without getting a license. Excess of that, you need a water well license, because water resources are Crown owned. That's why you need a license, but they have exemptions. Any water resource is a Crown owned resource. For dugouts, if your dugout is 2,500 cubic meters in capacity or less, you don't need to get a dugout approval. In excess of that, you do need to get a dugout approval. That's the way the rules are written. So, but the water resources, yes, you own the land, but the water on it is a Crown-owned resource, and that's why you need licenses.
One more question about licensing.
Yes.
What is the problem with licensing? Too much money, inspection, or what is the problem about this question?
Oh, it's with respect to the fact that for example, if you're using it for household use, that's the highest priority use. So as for a certain amount of use, you can have a family of 6, I believe, and 50 cow-calf pairs before you're going to before you're going to use up 1,250 cubic meters. So that's allowed. What they're using is it's with respect to competitive use, right? If you're drawing down the aquifer, or if you are having a water bottling operation, or if you're that kind of thing, competitive use against neighbor, and so I think that's where it stems from.
But if I'm using this for cows for stock.
Yes.
You said I need license.
Yes, if you build over, for example, over 2,500 cubic meter dugout, you do need license. Yeah.
Yes, but my question is very expensive or very difficult to get it, or what?
No, it's you just apply under the.
Yeah, this is my question, because the man just asked about licensing, and I don't know what is the problem to apply for licensing.
No, there's no issue. It's just a paper exercise, to the best of my knowledge. And you get your license, and away you go. You have to fulfill the information requirements. If you have lack of information, they'll ask you for that information. But I don't think it's an issue.
This means this is only sign and that's it.
Yeah.
And how much will cost this license?
I don't think it. Is there a fee for the license? No, there's no fee for the license. Okay, thank you.
On to the last couple presentations. Yeah, thank you very much. Alrighty, on to the last couple here. So next up we have Ken Lewis, and he's the ALICE coordinator with Lacombe and Red Deer County. This was a partnered workshop, so this will be more applicable to the Lacombe and Red Deer residents, but it's always good to know what's all out there for programming. So welcome, Ken, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Bettina. So yeah, like Bettina's saying, we're kind of moving to the local programs side of the agenda. I do work for ALICE, both in Lacombe County and Red Deer County. For the purpose of today, I'm just going to focus mainly on Lacombe County. One of the things with ALICE is that it's delivered uniquely in every community where there is ALICE, so it doesn't translate directly from one county to another, so that's why I'm going to just focus on Lacombe County, because Lacombe County is part of the workshop here today. All right. So kind of like what all the other presenters have started their presentations with their purposes, the program purpose. I thought I'd start ours with the ALICE vision. You guys can see it there for yourselves. Another way of putting it really is that ALICE strongly believes that farmers and ranchers can solve those big global problems, environmental problems specifically, at the same time as farmers and ranchers can also produce food and fiber. So we can produce food, fiber, and ecosystem services. That's what farmers and ranchers do. One of the things that's really quite interesting or unique, I guess, maybe about ALICE is that the farmers are very much in charge of the program, right from the farm gate right through to the boardroom. And what this means, like all the other programs, it's all voluntary. First off, the farmers and ranchers decide what you want to do on your farm or your ranch. You put in your application to ALICE or to any of the other programs that have been talked about today, but the decisions are yours to make. But then what's kind of unique about ALICE maybe is that it's actually the decisions about what the program looks like in the local area, as well as who's getting what funding. Those are all made by a local committee. We call them the ALICE Partnership Advisory Committee, or PAC is the short term for that. But yeah, so it's actually a local committee made up, the majority of the people on the committee in Lacombe County is actually 100% of the committee members are farmers and ranchers from the local community. So they're the ones that are making those decisions. So real quick, ALICE is fairly flexible. Again, our goal is to help farmers produce increased environmental services. So we don't necessarily have lists of what's eligible or what's not. So it just all boils down to things that are eligible are those things that help you produce improved environmental services on your farm. So I don't have lists of what's eligible, what's not. I do have a few examples of common projects, common things people are doing to deliver ecosystem services. So I'll just quickly go through those. The first one here is, again, the ecosystem service of improved water quality by providing livestock an alternative to drinking directly from a wetland, lake, creek, or river. Commonly, it's using offset watering systems, which we've been talking about all today. So another thing, thing that people are doing to deliver increased ecosystem services are things like riparian management fencing. There's just some examples there of some of the projects that ALICE has supported. Just checking it wasn't like a fire alarm or something. What types of ecosystem? Another one here is, just another example, is the ecosystem service of improved fish and wildlife habitat. In this case, it's the farmers are providing that service by putting little crossings in on small streams to allow small equipment and livestock to get across. On the cropping side, putting in buffers between wetlands, water bodies, and the crop is a way that farmers provide that increased water infiltration service from parts of their land. Again, a couple examples. And of course, the fairly common one is providing the ecosystem service of increased wildlife and pollinator habitat. Can be done by planting trees, whether that's in riparian areas, by creeks and rivers and wetlands and that, or in shelter belts. Those are also projects that ALICE can support. And lastly here, we also can provide funding for farmers who want to increase or improve the soil health and the soil carbon storage, etc., by adopting the AMP grazing techniques or the adaptive multi-paddock grazing. We can again cost share with you on that as well. And I guess, and this really I think applies to all the programs that have been talked about today, is does it work? And with Alice, we are very much trying to, as we go, measure and demonstrate and prove that when you guys do all these projects, it does work. We do see increased ecosystem services. I could do a whole talk on all the different things that we're doing to measure that and demonstrate that. But I think this here says it best, you know, as the saying is, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but a before and after picture is worth 10,000 words. So you can see for yourself, the picture on the left is when the farmer first was putting in the riparian management fencing and the alternative watering system. And then just 2 years later, you can see how everything is filled in. And so we can see really easily that, yeah, it does work. When farmers and ranchers do these things, the environmental services from the land improves. So on the dollars and cents side of Alice, here's what it is. And again, it's fairly open, kind of loosey-goosey to a certain extent, but that's the reality of how we do things. We provide up to 50% of your invoiced establishment costs, so it has to be an invoiced cost, on those things that you need in order to produce increased ecosystem services. So that means you can get up to 50% of the costs from Alice. Again, this is in Lacombe, for things like watering systems, fencing, crossings, all those kinds of examples that I just gave there. And then again, what's kind of unique about Alice is that over and above the establishment cost sharing there, we have these annual payments that we make to the farmer or to the rancher. And we say these payments are made to you for your ongoing management that's producing those increased ecosystem services. And as you can see highlighted there in Lacombe County, that payment can be as high as $100 per acre per year. And that is on those acres that are producing increased environmental services as a result of the new management or the new thing that you're doing. So that's how that works. And we do those annual payments. Typically, we're signing 5-year contracts with you, with the plan to renew that for another 5 years and so on into the future, assuming we have funding into the future. How to apply? Well, I got that up there. I got the contact info there because really that's the main step when it comes to Alice. And how to apply is to give us a call, give me a call. We'll get you started, get you going. There's completing a short application form we'll ask you to do, and we can help you with that. Then I take that application to the Partnership Advisory Committee, that group of farmers. They review your application, they make the funding decisions about it. Assuming it gets approved, then you and I sign a contract for that funding. You go ahead and do the work. When you're done, you give me a call, send in your invoices, your receipts. I come out and do a site visit. Everything looks good, you get your funding as per that agreement, and we start doing those annual payments. So it's really that basic. Again, it's quite similar to all the things that we've seen from the other programs and stuff today. We were talking at lunch about the fact that I think a lot of us probably in this room can remember a time when nobody was funding all this stuff, and now everybody and their dog wants to fund it, which I think is fantastic for you guys. So what it means, like Karen said, you can choose the program that best fits for you. So I think it's just fantastic that there's all these programs available for you. And yeah, I want to say thanks to everybody for the chance to come and share a little bit with you about Alice. If you are in Lacombe, then you kind of got a feel for what that's like. If you're in Red Deer, go ahead and talk to me. If you happen to have land in one of the other counties, like Wetaskiwin or Mountain View, or kind of the next closest examples, if you go to alice.ca, you can get connected with your Alice people there. You can also do a project on your farm. Oh, what am I trying to say? You can do an Alice project. You can apply for Alice funding on land that you rent as well. So if you happen to live in Clearwater County but rent some land in Lacombe County, by all means give me a call. We can talk about an Alice project on your rented land in Lacombe County, for example. That's it, unless there's any questions on how Alice works. Awesome, I'm going to turn it over to Bettina then.
Thank you, Ken. too many things in my head. Alrighty, last little presentation of the day. I'm just going to touch on the program that we have specific to Clearwater County. As Ken mentioned, all these programs are quite similar, and you can pick whatever program suits you and you think you'd like to get involved in. So we do have a program. We don't have Alice in Clearwater County, but we do have a program that is tailored specifically to Clearwater County. It's called the Caring for My Land program, and it was designed to assist landowners in implementing beneficial management practices on their land and reducing that financial burden that comes with implementing some of these projects. So although we don't have Alice, this program is quite similar. We don't have the per acre payments, but we do the cost sharing on the initial implementation of the project. So it's through a grant that we received through the Watershed Resiliency and Restoration Fund through the province of Alberta, which we're then able to pass on to our landowners to implement projects. So we subsidize projects anywhere from 25% to 75% cost share, up to a maximum of $5,000 per project. And it all depends on what type of project you're looking to complete. So anything from a dugout, providing off-site watering for a dugout or fencing would be somewhere between 25%, and if you're doing a riparian fencing project, so such as a fencing off a creek or stream with some off-site watering, doing rotational grazing, what else do we have? Beaver pond levelers, building crossings for livestock, those would be funded at anywhere between 50 to 75% cost share, up to that $5,000. And what else? We also have the eco buffers and shelter belts on there. We also encourage the bioengineering projects, often going along with those fencing projects along riparian areas and things like that. So all Clearwater County residents are eligible for the program, and it applies to private land as well as grazing leases, so you are eligible to apply if you have a lease. We will need approval from the rangeland agrologist to go ahead with the project on a grazing lease, but you are eligible to apply if it's leased or rented land as well. The process is fairly straightforward, just as Ken mentioned. It's fairly similar. You get in touch with us, say that you're interested in completing a project. You fill out the application form, or we can come out and complete a site visit and help you with the application. We take it for approval. Once the project is approved, we give you the go-ahead, and that's at that point you go ahead and purchase your materials and supplies and go ahead and implement the project. Once it's complete, you let us know and submit all your receipts. We complete a site visit, and you get reimbursed for the amount that was agreed upon. So it's pretty straightforward. It's directly through us at the county, so it's a bit more streamlined than some of the other programs. It is a little more limited than some of the provincial programs, but if it covers a project that you have in mind, it's definitely a great project to get involved in. There is limiting funding available, so it's always best to get in touch if you're interested in doing a project earlier in the year, so that you can get funding through the program. Yeah, that's about it. Does anybody have any questions on the Caring for My Land?